Right. We'd like to welcome you all to our City Council meeting for Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Please let the record show that all City Council members are present, as well as members of the city staff and numerous members of the public. I have asked our former mayor, Norm Searle, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Searle. It was good to hear you do that one last time, so appreciate you being willing to do that. We'll now have a moment of silence. As we do so, please keep in mind those members of our police and fire departments as they are out protecting the city. Also, with all the unrest in the world, we might keep in mind those in the Ukraine, as well as all the world leaders, that we might try to find a peaceful resolution. Please keep in mind those members of our armed forces that may be put in harm's way. And also keep in mind our City Council and RDA Board as they make decisions tonight. They might make decisions that are in the best interest of the residents of our city. We'll now take a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now have a time for public comment. This is an opportunity for people to address the City Council. You can share your ideas or thoughts or concerns. No action will be taken during this time, and we ask that as you come up, you state your name and address, and that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Hopefully all of you had had a chance to sign the roll outside. It is important that we keep an accurate record of who attended our meeting tonight. Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to presentations and reports. For Mayor's report, I just have one thing actually, and I'll kind of call on Mr. Eggett. The city received a grant or an award today. You want to share that, what that's going to mean to us, Mr. Eggett? Sorry to put you on the spot, but it's kind of exciting.
Yes, we applied for a transportation and land use connection grant through Wasatch Front Regional Council, and we received a recognition of an awarding of basically a 30% match to their 70% match. So we're going to basically gain a $70,000 grant for a $30,000 contribution for $100,000 total grant opportunity to update our general plan. So we'll get a professional guidance and do a good updated general plan and let them pay the majority of the funds for that. So that's pretty exciting reward, yeah.
So thank you for your work on that. That was great to get
Thank
that.
you.
Moving on next, we'll go to the city administration report. Mr. Brooks.
And also thanks to Cody on that. Mike did the bulk of the work, but Cody had to find us some money, so otherwise we couldn't have pulled that one off. But they both did wonderful, and we were excited to see that. And they moved quite fast. We just got that submitted last week, so that was exciting. I'll just fly through this as best I can. The department reports are in your packets. There's a couple things I just highlight as I go through there. I read these each month. Obviously, our sales tax, again, remains strong. That's the one thing that we monitor quite closely because we have to. And if those start to drop for whatever reasons, there's things we need to be looking at. But it remains strong at this point. We're excited about that. As far as budget goes, we're in pretty good shape. As you go through those numbers, those are all in there. I think we're sitting at about 59% of the budget year. And we're well, except in one area that's, I think, got us all concerned in both police, fire, and public works, and that's obviously our fuel budgets are going to take a hit. They already have. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you'll see some amendments unless we can really move some funds around before the end of the year. And that's just one of those things you can't anticipate, and they budget, and then when the gas goes through the roof, you're just stuck. So there's another thing in there, and I kind of wanted to address this mainly for our new members. Randy lists all of those inspections in there. Our fire department actually starts that off, all of our business inspections. Every year they do this, and so they divide that between the 3 teams that he has. Chief's back there. And then they go out and perform all those inspections, and the ones that don't pass are then handed over to Randy, and he does follow through up on that. I know that takes them a lot of time, but they had some of those results listed in there. Just that's why that explains that to you, how that whole process works. That's a yearly thing, and it's quite a bit of work. I also, as you read, I love to go through the police report things. If you look at those, and he gives those little brief synopses in there. I see these things on YouTube all the time about these people who walk into like Burger King or McDonald's or something, and they just start throwing cups and all this kind of crazy stuff. If you notice, we had one of those in our Burger King this year. So for a city the size of Riverdale, and you read through that report right there, we get a little bit of everything, and that's every month. Scott and these guys have to deal with this stuff, but I got a kick out of that one. I'd like to see video on that. We'd see if we could post that one too. But as far as fire department goes, a couple things. Jared listed his meds testing in there, which is not something you'd normally see. That's just kind of telling you how good a shape his guys are in. They seem to be doing quite well. The other thing that I'd highlight on you, because I don't think you heard this, even when I contacted Jared initially about this one, we had another truck rollover up on the overpass, and nobody really heard about this one because it wasn't cows or anything, but it was another apple truck. And it took a pretty good spill again. So those just don't seem to end. I don't know why they can't re-engineer that somehow, but it's a little bit scary when one of those goes over and hits the cars below. Then we're going to have a mess. So, but our guys again responded to that and handled it. They're getting so used to this now; it's just routine for them. But most cities never see something like that. March anniversaries, the ones, if you saw that, Camille over in the police department, and I think Scott would echo this, she is a wonderful employee, man. She is just fun. If you've ever gone over there and been able to deal with her, she works that front window, and she's just marvelous. I've known Camille. We went to high school together, so I've known her forever, but it makes me a little bit nervous when she's knocking on that 18-door window. I know Scott's a little bit worried because we'll see her leave probably within the next couple of years, so she's talking about it. And then, ironically, I wouldn't normally point this one out because it's not a huge number, but we have 8 years with Miranda. She happens to be here tonight. We might as well recognize her. Those of you who don't know her, raise your hand, Miranda, so they know you. She runs all of our senior facility and all those programs, the lunch and all that kind of stuff. So, Miranda, we've enjoyed having you, and she does a wonderful job over there. So congratulations on your 8 years, and we hope we get a lot more out of you. So you didn't expect that one, did you? Our staffing authorization remains where it's been. No movement on that. We will probably see a little bit, hopefully this year, that we can get some of those spots that we are really hurting on, fill in a couple of those. The only other thing I would point out, because this one's on mine, the monthly report that I give you, I give the numbers that the court has money-wise, so total revenue, warrant revenue, and all that kind of stuff. COVID's just killed us in the court because they're not holding court, or they haven't for the longest time. A lot of that stuff got postponed, but I did finally see a little bit of an uptick this month, so hopefully that's going to get back to normal a little bit where we can start seeing some of that revenue come back in. We don't do that for that reason. We do it as another public service to the community, but it does provide us a little bit of income that's kind of nice to put it back into the budget on those kind of things. So when that's been down so far, we've taken a pretty good hit there. I think Cody could confirm that. So it wasn't a huge uptick, but it was a little bit. So it was refreshing to see that. And talking to the judge, I think we're getting back a little bit more to normal. We're getting close to that. So I had Mike's thing in there. So that's pretty much all I had, unless you had questions on any of those department reports or anything I touched on there. Okay, that's all.
Thanks, Mr. Brooks. Always a lot going on. That's good. Okay, number 3. Recognition of former Mayor Norm Searle and Council Member Brent Ellis. This is something we've been trying to get to for a couple of months now. I'm excited to see them both here. I kind of wondered who would be here to see them, if their families would be here with them, or if they'd have a big entourage with them. And it's interesting to see. It's kind of, they're going to be honored here, kind of how they were viewed in the community. I mean, they went about their work, and not a lot of fanfare, not a lot of big following, but they did a lot of good things, you know. And I was just thinking this morning how much time they've spent, you know, serving the city. I mean, it's probably 20 years for Mayor Searle and probably 10 or 15 for Councilor Ellis, and I mean that's 35 years of service sitting right there. So we just we've got some gifts for them, and so we want to do it one at a time. You think, Mr. Brooks? Maybe you're doing both.
Yeah, I think so. If we could take Brent first.
Okay, have Mr. Ellis come up, and where do you want to have him come up?
Just right, kind of over there where we generally do it. Chris is going to try and take some pictures for us here.
Okay.
In fact, I might have Chris go first while he's here. And kudos to Chris again. You know, he's one of those jack of all trades, and I told him I was going to do this, but he took the time and effort to put a thumb drive together for both Brent and Mayor Searle that includes a lot of pictures over the years and some of the videos that we did and stuff. So kudos to Chris, and he came up with some great ideas. Ironically, we had 2 Centennial Flags left that we will present to them tonight. Again, that comes from Chris, and he kind of poked me in the ribs one day and said, "Hey, you want to get rid of these? This would be a good way to do it." So here we are. Yeah, he didn't want them in his office. So don't take offense, Brent or Norm. They're brand new flags. They've never flown, but we want to make sure you guys got them since that passed last year. So if we could have you come up there, Brent, we'll hand those things to you, and Chris will get a couple pictures. So
works a little better if we stand about right here as far as the. Might as well use the microphone.
Sorry.
Anyway, in going first, I just wanted to express my appreciation. I've been with the city a long time, and you've been here for a good chunk of that, and it's always refreshing to see someone who serves for the right reason, who serves just for the sake of serving. And so I just have a DVD. That is the Riverdale 75th anniversary video on there. For those that don't know, of course, Councilor Ellis was a big part of that. Actually born on the same day of the corporation. So he was a big part, and your family is a big part of that video. We appreciate that. And then I have a flash drive. I've taken a few pictures now and then over the years. And so I pulled some of the ones off that you were in, ribbon cuttings, some city events, and I also have the video on there as well as all the outtakes that didn't make it to the final cut for you. So anyway, again, we appreciate everything you've done.
All right, thank you so much.
Brent, we gotta
Show her like the Olympics do and
do it. Look all official. I mean, I would just echo those same sentiments. I've known Brent a long time, and Brent's family even longer than that. So it's fun to see him, and we enjoyed him on the council. He was a great supporter of the employees, and we just want you to know that was greatly appreciated, and we're going to miss you. We'd love to have you still here, but we recognize you got a life and you got to live it too. So anyway, we're glad to have one of those flags for you. And then we got a little presentation for him. Riverdale City, Brent Ellis, City Council, and then the years that he served on it. So
thank you so much.
I hope it's a little bit different than the other one. Are they the same? Are they? We got the seniors got one for mayor, but okay, well that's good. But anyway, congratulations and thank you very much.
No, I didn't have any more to say really, but let's get a picture with him so Chris can use it.
All right.
Brent, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Brent and I were side by side, it seems like, so just really appreciate all he did. Anything, Mr. Ellis? All right, Mayor Searle, let's have you come up.
Again, pleasure having you serve many years, and again, I do have a tribute service that we put together on the DVD for you, and it was a lot of fun putting that together. And like I mentioned, I've taken a few pictures over the years. So we put them all on a flash drive for you. I also put on there the videos of the 75th anniversary, the Veterans Memorial videos, and all those videos. They're also on that flash drive. It's all on there. So even through newsletters on you, I should have counted how many Mayor's Corners you've written. Yeah. So I threw all the newsletters on there, so you have all those. And anyway, we appreciate, on behalf of the employees, of course, we appreciate everything you've done for us. And like I said, it's refreshing to see someone that serves for the sake of serving, and to be able to do it for all the right reasons. So thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. Thank you.
I think at this point I'll have Marie come on up from the seniors. They had a presentation that they wanted to present to you, Mayor, so we'll turn the time over to her. Do you want to say some things, Marie? Or?
Well, not a whole lot. I don't even think I need a microphone.
Okay.
My voice carries pretty strongly. But on behalf of the board for the senior center, we want you to know how much we appreciate all you've done for the board. You've worked hard for the board all through the years. And I'd like to say especially during lockdown, you were there with Miranda just doing everything you could to try to continue to serve the seniors even though we were locked down. And it didn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. We do appreciate all that you do. So on behalf of the board, we would like to present our clock. Riverdale City Mayor Norm Searle, thank you for your service. Riverdale Senior Center.
Beautiful, thank you.
And there's the box and everything in here. So I'll just leave that there.
All right, thank you, Mary.
We do appreciate all that you've done for
Thank
the
you.
senior center.
We love the seniors.
And Miranda might have a word or two.
Sure, I'll say something real quick. Like Marie was saying, Mayor Searle is just amazing. We were down staff, and we were trying to get our kitchen reopened just for takeout meals during COVID. And he said, I'll get my food handler's permit, and I'll come work in the kitchen. And that meant so much. And he did. He washed dishes. He did everything. That meant so much to the seniors. And so thank you so much.
Probably the only guy that was 79 that ever got a food handler's permit.
And we're not done yet, Mayor. Okay. I would just mention that the fire department has already given him a plaque from theirs. He was out at the station one day and they took advantage of it, but the police department also wanted to recognize you and say a few words here.
So I wanted to recognize the mayor for his 8 years of just excellent leadership and what I like to call what we put on the plaque, leadership and unwavering support of the police department. And it has been unwavering, and he took us through some of our more difficult times we've gone through in law enforcement there for a year or two, and was always so supportive. Same thing when we had a protest group that came into the city, and he was offering to come help, sending me pictures from his time in the military, and he was ready to help out if needed. But he was very supportive when we had to send our department to Salt Lake City for a week to help them with the mess that they had going on. And he's always trusted me to do my job the way I felt that it should be done the best for the citizens of the city. So can't say enough about what he's given to us in the police department for his support, and so much appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief. This really means a lot.
Not done yet.
We're still going, Mayor. We'll start off with the clock, just simply because,
You mind if I say one thing?
No.
Because I already did the plaque. So I can echo everything that Brinkman just said, but I'll go a little bit further on one end of it. I came to a city as a new fire chief, and knowing that I had some significant challenges to overcome, and the sheer support, the follow-up, and more so the friendship. I gained a friend, and I really appreciate that. So there's no doubt the unwavering support you've provided for my department, and just to be there as a phone call, as a friend, somebody to get advice from, has been priceless. So I can't thank you enough for that. But wanted the opportunity to say that in front of a group. So appreciate everything you do.
Thanks again for that plaque too. Appreciate that. It's really nice. So thank you.
So we likewise got a clock, and they look quite similar there. But I would say we started this before you guys did. November. I started planning this in November. We were hoping the mayor would be back by December. Okay, you might have beat me there. But we really did. But because of the mayor's health, we kept putting this off and putting this off and putting this off. And so we've been waiting. We had an open house planned a couple of times, and we just didn't want to jeopardize that anymore. But it's like echo what Mayor Braden said there, is it's good to hear your voice back again and to see you too. And you look healthy, and you have so many clocks, you should never be late again. So we would present that one to you from, not that you ever were, but I've actually known Norm since I was in 9th grade. So I go back even further with him. I dated his sister-in-law in 9th grade. And his little twins I used to play with on the floor. They're grown men and have their own families now. So it's kind of weird thinking about it. We were much younger back
Should
then,
I
Mayor.
tell them how old the twins are now?
That would be good.
They used to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 50 years old.
Jeez. Holy crap. That makes me feel old now. I wish I wouldn't have done that. But yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I've actually worked with them in some outside capacities, and it's weird for me to see them as grown men now. But also, here's a flag for you, Mayor.
Thank you very
We
much.
know that you were very instrumental even in getting the thing there. Here's all the name tags that we had. If you look at those, we started off as Commissioner Searle when he was on the Planning Commission. And then we've had different ones as we've moved up, and Chris has saved those, and now they're in your closet instead of his, so we're good. But I mean, I couldn't say anything more and echo that. If you think about it, this is just in his most recent tenure, but we had a massive landslide. These are things we've never seen before, nor has many cities. We had a tornado. We've had the COVID. I mean, these are major events that, man, they were just difficult to storm and to get through them, and the mayor was certainly the forefront of all those things. So he's done a lot for Riverdale City, and his mark will always be here. And I don't know that we could ever thank you enough for what you did. And I appreciate our friendship and everything you did for me personally and us as a city and all the employees. I know all of us are very grateful for the support you gave us. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. So,
I want to say just a couple of words before we give you the mic. It's funny, we're giving this guy all these clocks, and he's retired. I don't think he needs a clock anymore for anything. But anyway, I want to echo kind of what was said. You know, Chief Shawley talked about what an example he is and what a friend. He's been a huge example to me. And, I mean, I've already called him several times since I've been the mayor. So I'm glad he's around, and that I consider him a friend as well. He set a shining example for me about what a mayor's supposed to be, and really gave me a guide for, you know, how to lead the city. He left it in fantastic shape, and I feel lucky to be taking over a city that's in such great shape. You know, there's a lot of cities that the mayor comes in and it's kind of a mess, but this city was in great shape. And so I just appreciate him, and hope he knows how much I do. I've tried to express that to him, but we just really appreciate you, Mayor. So we'll let you say a few words.
thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate that. And I thought of a few things that I could say, but I know there's people here like Ted and some of the others that are waiting to conduct some business, and
All the time you want.
they're on the end of the next agenda. You know, they're on the next agenda for probably the Rda meeting. But 20 years ago, I retired from my civilian and military jobs, and never had any thought in mind ever being involved in city government or government of any type. And I met Bruce Burrows, Mayor Burrows, on a pioneer trek one summer, and he invited me to serve on the planning commission, and kind of went from there. I did that. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people I met, the people I worked with, and and then was city council for a term, and then on to serve as the mayor. But I just wanted to thank you for this recognition tonight. I appreciate this. I appreciate the video, Chris. The flag, I did ask Chris if I could buy a flag because I getting our flagpole, getting some work done on it, but it'll be going the next few days. And I want to have a Riverdale flag for it, fly on special occasions and that. And I'm afraid I'll wear it out if I fly it every day, so we'll see. But anyway, I think the greatest part about this, I think we've done some good things over the years, all of us together, not me, is the friendships and the people that I've had the chance to work with and associate with. That's been the biggest blessing of the whole thing, is all of you, city council, all of you, and I wish you all the very best. And you two gals that just got elected and got put on the council, I wish you the best also. You know, the number one reason cities are formed is to provide services, core services to communities. And that's our primary purpose, is to provide those services. And we've done that, and I think probably in a superb and extraordinary manner. The service has been provided, the feedback that I've had. I know our residents, if you go knock on the doors, they really love living in Riverdale, and it's because I think of the service and the people, and it's the people here that make that all possible, and you're the ones, the senior center, fire department, police, community services, public works, don't want to miss anybody, but it's just everybody. And I've always felt that we've had the best, and I've told you this before, we have the best employees. And when you got really good employees, then we tried to keep them happy. And if you got happy employees out providing the service, you can't help but being successful. So I would thank each of you for the support that I've had and your friendship. It's been, I've not quite 20 years, Mayor Mitchell. It's been 16 I've been involved, but important part of my life. And I just want to thank each of you for make this a big part of my life and things to remember. So you're all awesome, and wish you the very best. Thank you.
Your entourage with you. Gotta call those twins. Yeah. All right, what a great couple of public servants. Let's just quickly give one more round of applause. Thanks to both of them. All right. Next item on the presentation reports is a report and notice of certification on the AFCU petition for annexation. Mr. Brooks or Mr. Eggett.
Yeah, I'll have Mike deal with this one. He's much more versed on it. Him and Michelle both. They've been working this one pretty hard. So
This is just, as noted in the work session, this is checking a box on the logistics and the process of an annexation request. We're at a point now where the recorder would need to certify that petition. She has done so to verify the accuracy and submittal, and all the information required by code has been provided to the city. And as a result, we're required to report as such to the council that we're now at the point of moving forward and noticing and moving forward with the protest period. So really, that's the long and short. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to say on that unless there's any questions for me. But again, it's just a reporting item. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for all your work on that. I know it's a long process, and we'll just keep moving forward. Thanks for checking those boxes. We'll now move on to consent items. Our first one, number 1, consideration to approve the meeting minutes from March 1st, 2022 work session and regular council meeting. Is there any corrections or changes to the minutes? If not, a motion would be in order. Councilor Arnold?
Move to approve consent items.
Let's just do them one at a time.
Let's just do the meeting minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Motion to approve meeting minutes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Consent item number 2, consideration to ratify the Planning Commission election results for Kathy Eskelson as chair and Robert Wingfield as vice chair of the Planning Commission. Any discussion or questions about that? If there's none, a motion to approve would be in order. Councilor Arnold?
Move to approve the election results for Kathy Eskelson as chair and Robert Wingfield as vice chair of the Planning Commission.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on that? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. Item number 3, discussion and consideration of completing a community survey. We will start with Mr. Brooks on this one.
As we mentioned in the work session there, this was requested by Councilmember Hanson and Councilmember Arnold. We've done surveys in the past. It's been a while. I think it was 2014. Annie, you could correct me on that one. That's just in the back of my head for some reason. I was thinking that. There's a number of reasons why we do the surveys. In the past, we weren't really excited. I can speak from staff's point of view that we got a lot of the information we were seeking, and it seemed to be a lot of work. So it makes us a little bit nervous, but I mean, it's not that we won't do it. It's just I think we need to develop some better approaches to try and seek the information we want. But that's kind of what I guess we're brought this to you is what do you want to know and what do you want to hear about? Because ideally, like Cody just pulled up one from Far West this week. They do them on occasions, and they'll use that Survey Monkey, and they just generally tackle one item at a time. We don't know if that would be more effective or what all you're seeking. There's some things that we would like to know, obviously, but it's always a risk in who you're getting as your audience. If you're doing the Survey Monkey, you're probably looking at maybe not completely, but a little bit younger audience that would partake in those. The mailings, I think we thought before, is we got a lot of the more senior members, and so you always take that chance that you get a true cross example of your citizens. So I guess that's where we're at, is if you want us to do one, we need some direction of what you're looking for or what you want us to include in that, and we can kind of come up with ways and suggestions and recommendations once we get a little guidance from you guys. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, once I realized that we hadn't reached out for a while, it seemed like it was a good time. I mean, 8 years is pretty significant. We've had a lot of change in the city over the last 8 years. And as Cody kind of had mentioned, there's new ways to reach out to hopefully get a better response and hopefully a better mix of the demographic in the city. So we really get a better view of what people, I think we would want to know, and I can't speak for everyone, but, how are we doing on our services, on our service levels? Anything that we would want input on for future. I mean, the topic that came up about fiber, I think probably could have been addressed in a city survey at some point as we were looking forward, and it could have come up that way. And so I don't have specific questions or things, but basically to make sure that we are aware of what the citizens want their city to be and to look like as we continue to grow, especially with all this new development, what their housing desires, commercial desires are. And not that we can guarantee those things, but at least we can show the public that we've listened and we've heard what they had to say. And I really liked that idea. I had written that down too, that maybe there's an option to do a weekly outreach or monthly outreach. I did write down SurveyMonkey too as a good option, because if it's not mobile, nobody's going to do it, other than those that don't use mobile, I guess. But that we could also put links and QR codes in the newsletter and water bill for those that wouldn't see like a social media outreach. When I did my campaign this year, I did a lot of my campaigning through social media, where it actually allows you to pick your demographic and only those people see it. And so I think that is an option that might help with making sure we get a mix of renters and owners, age groups, all the different demographics. It could help. Let's see, what else was I thinking? And this was just all random thoughts. I wasn't exactly sure. I really wanted the input of everyone on the council and the staff, and I didn't know how to start the process where we would start to put together what we would want to ask people, and if we would do it all at once or, like you kind of suggested, one at a time, to start to get that information, but mainly to reestablish with the citizens that we care about what they think, and it's important for us to know as we make these decisions. And I think it's a good way to reach out to provide information. I mentioned to the mayor that I've had a number of citizens have really interesting conversations with me about the sales tax situation because of the article in the newsletter. And so it kind of, if we could reach out and educate as we go with the really great charts that you've put together that Cody has, that as we have to make these hard decisions on property tax and all these other things, it's going to make it easier for us to just decide, because we've shown the residents that we've educated them and we've listened to what they have to say in response. So I'm really open. I just felt like 8 years was long enough, and maybe it's time to find a way to reach out again.
Any other comments? Councilor Arnold?
So I supported Councilor Hanson in this because I think it's important to support other ideas as we look for information and things like that. I am not in favor of a survey like this. We have so many things. So I was around in the last survey, and we got I think the biggest issue was recycling was a big deal. They wanted recycling, which we were already doing. It caused a lot of upheaval over something we were doing, and we have even the city Facebook page has interacted with the citizens Facebook page, and I think the fiber internet thing was handled wrong, to bring it that way and then come to the council that way. It was brought forth wrong that way. But almost everything that we get, we can launch things. We can launch the information from our webpage into the citizen web, and I think the citizens webpage has like 4,000 members right now. I mean, I haven't looked for a while to see how many that is, but we get a big influx of something. I mean, we get hundreds of comments if something strikes a nerve somewhere, and so I think we can get surveys just by doing that. If we have issue by issue that we can reach out, ping a couple of things with the city residents, with your mayor's corner and things like that, you can invite people to join or something like that. So we, that's where we hear them. As much as whenever I hear a topic, and I would encourage everybody to do this as well, but when something happens in the world, in our world, walk and talk to the neighborhood, knock doors, and it's not pleasant. I mean, I walked and knocked the doors on the landslide, and I was threatened several times, and I was, said, you got a heck of a backbone coming up here knocking on this door, and I'm like, the city can't help. It's a private property issue. I'm just telling you right now. So I think, the use of social media would be one of the best ways that we could ping ideas and educate, because a raise in property taxes and the franchise taxes I hate, but it's something that we needed to do. And especially if we're going to earmark that stuff or those funds for, our core services, is something I think we need to do. So I wouldn't be crazy about spending the money. I would support, if the consensus is to do a survey, I would support it. But I would think that there'd be better ways to generate that information from the populace, through means that are free. It's there and available.
Can I just clarify? I agree that the really lengthy, huge packet that we mailed out, I don't think that's the best approach, and especially the cost for what we got back. that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm more on board with that and with whatever ideas you would bring up, that we can do it a little bit at a time, or, pinpoint really important issues, or just to start to open the dialogue a little bit more with the residents to show we're getting their input and requesting it from the whole city.
Well, that Facebook page really sways, right? I mean, anybody who participates in it, you can really feel the pressure one way or the other when you come through. So, I mean, I think we really do get a sense of what's on people's mind.
Councilor Merrill?
Yeah, and I agree. I think that especially those that want to say something, they will. And I think those are the ones that we do need to take their concerns into consideration. If they're willing to bring them to our attention through, whatever means we want to kind of tap into their opinions, that obviously is up for discussion, and we can still reconfigure how we're going to go about doing that to make sure we do kind of tap into the different generations, so to speak. I do think 8 years is also kind of a long time. There's been so much that has happened in the last couple of years especially, that I think people's priority on things has also changed drastically. And so I do feel like that should come to the forefront as well, to be considered on what's important to the residents right now, and being brought to our attention as the council. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay,
Just
Councilor
one more
Arnold?
thought.
Sure.
One of the things that we have to remember is most of the citizens don't know the intricacies of the budget and things like that. So that, they're saying, hey, I want Kool-Aid, or I want the splash pad. I want the splash pad running. And it's like, we're going to be talking about the water this time, and the water that we're not going to have for the park. And everybody has their special interest that they love about Riverdale, but then they don't get in and go, okay, is that worth one police officer? Is it worth one member of the fire department, or the truck that's going to be coming that, we're not getting support from Ann Milner? When Home Depot catches on fire, do we just stand out there with marshmallows from a long ways away and still get them cooked? I mean, there's a lot of things when people are just saying, this is what I want. And that's what you get from the surveys and I love fiber. I want fiber at any cost. And it's like, okay, at any cost? Are you willing to pay for it? No, I'm not willing to pay for it. But if the city will pay for it, well, you will end up paying for it. That kind of stuff. So we do have to be careful about seeing what people want, because then you publish results and they're saying, well, yeah, everybody wants fiber. And then we turn around and say, well, how's it coming into the city? And then we have, stories from Brigham City and things like that, where it's like, well, we might want to be careful how we do that. So you got to be careful of how the pot is stirred, I guess is.
If you get the feedback, then you have to. Well, you don't have to,
Right.
but if you don't,
Get a feedback to feedback.
if you don't act the way the feedback requested, then that's a good point. Councilor Stevens.
I'm just, I've always been leery of surveys because they're usually driven. There usually is something behind it that makes me very suspicious. I think the good idea, Ferry, is yes, let's make warm and fuzzy. Let's do a survey and get but it's just like, for what purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? Just these nebulous general ideas of getting feedback. Well, Councilman Arnold has said heard him say this a couple times, many times over the years, is issues are typically local. There's a Ritter Drive issue. There's the flooding issue, and things impact certain neighborhoods. And so to find a consensus for things that are throughout the city is, there might be something out there. I mean, the fiber optic thing from a couple of weeks ago, they put it out on Facebook, and it motivated 2 council members to bring it onto the council for discussion. Hey, they served their purpose. They were very effective. They got 2 city council members to do their bidding and bring it to the council for discussion. That's pretty effective. And it's timely, and it doesn't necessarily need to be wait for a survey to be done. I mean, they got it done. And I just, I'm not hearing a reason other than the grandiose, feel good, we got to do something type of a thing, which, no, we don't have to do something.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So, were we looking for consensus to?
Yeah, I'm as confused as I was coming in here. So I guess I don't know. I do like the concept. I read that survey that Far West did, and I liked that. I don't remember what the question was now, but I liked the format, the fact that it was short and it was simple and it was concise to that one issue. And I wouldn't be opposed to that. Those are things we could throw together quite easily if we had that one issue. Like the fiber would have been a good one if we'd have jumped on that one a while ago. But I guess that's what my question is do we have those one issues? That's something we could do without question. I don't think that's an issue. And I think it would be valuable, at least to some degree, to give us some feedback on it. But whether or not we go to a full-blown survey, I don't know. I'm not getting the feeling that might be a consensus of a majority there. So,
Cody.
So like we said, whoops, I turned it off. So like we said, a lot of times it's going to have budget impacts. So what if in the tentative budget we put a fairly small amount, like say $1,000, and make sure it's in your legislative budget, and whether we use that for additional newsletters, publications, whatever the case may be, there'll be a tiny bit of money there if we decide we need like a Survey Monkey type subscription. If we don't use it, it's not going to interfere with the other budget, but there'll be a small amount of money there if we need it for something. Can we get a consensus on that? Is that okay?
I'm in favor of that. You know what? Can I make a comment to this?
Yes.
Okay, you use the word newsletter. Were we talking about newsletters or are we talking about surveys?
Counselor Hanson just brought up that's one, and I think Counselor Arnold brought that up too. So say you decide to do an additional mailing on a topic rather than a survey, because that money, I'm not going to earmark it for a survey. It would just be available, say, for public communication or public outreach. Does that work? Maybe that's because then I know what to do from the budget.
Counselor Stevens.
Here is, because when you get into surveys can be horribly manipulatively, and so there's push surveys, there's pull surveys. For not to get down into the weeds, into the psychology of, are you trying to motivate an action or move in a certain trend, or are you trying to solicit responses? Because that's a push-pull type thing. Now, what you're talking about is education. Now, I can see something being done because we're going to have drought. That's going to be on the plate here shortly, and water conservation and all those things, and that's going to be coming up in the newsletters to as topics of things that are going to be impacting. Now, that said, that could be done for educational, but is that done in a survey? No. And so when you're talking about surveys, that's a different animal than a letter or newsletter.
Yeah, and all I'm trying to do is pull you guys and get a response if you want some money for something. Now, if you don't, that's great. I'm just trying to get a response and get a consensus so we know what direction to go with this. Do we want to do anything? Are we fine where we're at? And if we need something, we'll scrape together.
Consent item. I don't think we're not trying to do a big action. So we're just I just think a mild, like Councilor Arnold.
Well, what Cody's asking is, it isn't even an action because he has to put the budget together to bring to us. So I would say yes, put some money in there. I don't care how much it is because you do the budget, you understand it, you put the money there. If we don't spend it, we allocate it somewhere else and push it somewhere else or pull it somewhere else, whatever the push-pull is. But the thing is, like, we have 4 color pages that go out every month to every bill that we can use that, and that doesn't cost us a dime. And we can say, throw this in there and communicate via something, or anything we want to do. We have the ability to find out the issues and educate and all that kind of stuff with the assets that we already have. But if you don't put it in the budget, we don't have that. So if you put it in the budget, we do have that at our discretion. So I would be in favor of whatever you think is fair. And then when we talk about it in strategic planning, when we're talking about the budget, that's when we would say yes or no, kill it, move it forward, whatever. But it's what may.
So let me restate my consensus. What if I put a nominal amount of money in your department's budget for some kind of public outreach? And then we will talk more in depth about it at strategic planning in May with a tentative budget.
And we can give the thumbs up or they can give the thumbs up or
Well,
thumbs down
can
at
I just
that
make one more
point.
comment,
Yeah,
Mayor?
one more comment.
I would want feedback from the staff, not just waiting on us to come to you to say, okay, you've put the nominal that we agreed to, but I mean, what are some of your ideas? I mean, we're a working organization. We as elected officials, it looks pretty bad optic-wise for us to say we're not interested in input from the residents in a uniform format. I think that's ill-advised on our part. But I would be open to any kind of ideas of doing it in a way that makes sense financially and that we get good information, which is our biggest concern, and hit those demographics. But we want to know that we're doing well on our services. That's not just a crazy survey. That's, do you like your garbage service, or should we?
And I think to a couple of the counselors' response, like if we're not doing well, we hear about it on Facebook. Honestly, and
There's a lot more ways to communicate than Facebook, and boy, do I hear
or we get calls, and so like a lot of times if we're not doing good, I think we hear about it. Is my personal perspective. And like I live in Far West, that's how I knew Far West did a survey. So like I don't feel like their survey questions were perfect, because like it was about Christmas lights that they do, and they asked, should we spend more or should we spend less? Well, I think we should spend the same amount because my kids love them, and so like there was some questions that probably could have been worded better and things like that. But that's up to you guys and how you get your feedback. If you get communications, that's why I think if we get a consensus, then you have a little money, and if you decide we need to do something during the year, we can do that. But I don't
I
think
want
we
the
can really
staff's
take.
input is what I was saying, and not that it's just.
And we will. That was one of the
Right.
things, and I like this idea because then that gives us something to go forward on. So, and I see at least 3 heads up there nodding. So I think
Okay, consensus.
at least 3 of them are kind of
Raise,
nodding. So.
raise your hands, and if you're in favor of putting a small amount of money into the budget. Okay,
right.
4 in favor, and if you're opposed,
I'm opposed.
4 to 1. Okay.
No money.
We will
money.
address that with
Who's opposed?
staff.
No money for that. And
I mean, the idea is if it's there, we can do some things.
days
so.
1.
The yeas won that.
Yeah,
Just
and we
making
will.
sure.
We will. That's just to put it in the budget, in the tentative budget, and we will still have a chance to discuss whether we're going to leave it in there.
Sounds good.
All right, that took a long time. Okay. We'll now move on to item number 4, which has the potential to be just as bad. Discussion regarding the 2022 water restrictions.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Douglas.
So I think you've all seen the letters. So we were basing, their initial proposal is to not start irrigation until the middle of May. They're also proposing that this year we'll only have 1 day a week to water on outside watering. And that's if we stayed the same. We're kind of staying status quo. It could get better. It could get worse. Our main meeting with Weber Basin will be in April, the first week of April. They usually have it by now, but they're trying to hold off and try and determine if anything is going to change or get better. And I think a couple of key things we'd just like some guidance on right now is if it stays the way it is, there's a couple of things that happens fairly early and that starts affecting us if we stay like we are. One of them would be the splash pad. Last year we opened it, then we shut it down. Our biggest cost and our biggest amount of work is starting that thing. So I would like a little bit of guidance that if we stay in the drought, are we going to operate that or are we not going to operate it?
And you need to know.
Probably at least by the middle of April at the very latest,
After your meeting.
after the meeting. The second thing is talking with Weber Basin last year. As a city, they're not opposed to us designating area as a green area type thing. So like if we kept a park area greener than everything else so that we could still run our recreation programs, have our Old Glory days. So maybe we choose like a Riverdale Park that we're actually gonna water that more than 1 day a week if that's the restriction, and we try and keep them programs running at least through the middle of the summer so that we can have a little bit of space. The other thing is if we do only water 1 day a week, we're probably going to need to look at closing off the parks. We had a lot of damage at Golden Spike last year. We really was hoping to reseed that park this year, but with no water, we're not going to reseed. The other thing that really plays into no water is how much fertilizer do we want to apply, because we don't want to burn them up. And then we'll probably spend more this year on weed control because we're going to be growing more weeds than we are grass with no water. And then the final thing is just kind of the restrictions. Are we in favor of following what they recommend? Because it'll be critical that we follow that if we want to keep getting our water from them. Yeah, I mean, they're going to put it more as a mandate type to us. The other thing they're looking for is not only outside restriction, but they're going to probably ask for a 10% reduction in inside water use, which that's hard. You know, we've seen what the residents did last year. In August, they did a great job here. I've spent years trying to get my lawn to look good again. I don't want to do this anymore than anybody else, but there is not much water up there right now. They're concerned if we even have water for outdoor use right now. So just wanted to get this in front of you and kind of get a consensus if that's some of them things, if we're going to move that way, and when you'd like to see it. You know, if that next meeting happens in April, would you like to see something back at that first meeting to kind of make some decisions there? But I wanted to at least talk about it so that we're in front of it and not behind the curve. I felt like last year we was chasing our tails a lot of the time behind the curve. So they're pretty set on their restrictions. They're trying to buy $6 million of water out of Strawberry just to supplement the little tiny bit that we have right now. A lot of the reservoirs are at 20%. Going into this, so
How's our aquifer?
dropping. There's been no recharge on it, so they'll continue to pump. They'll pump harder this year than they did last year, so we might even end up drilling deeper to try and keep our water coming out of the well.
Counselor Stevens?
Okay, where we have our water source, and we have a lot of surface water, and we're giving that to Weber Basin to make it into culinary. Are the restrictions they're putting out are pretty broad based? Now, we as a city, we have our own water source, because you talk about the $6 million from Strawberry. We as Riverdale, would we be participating in that purchase? Because as I understood it, I thought we were self being able to sustain what we needed.
So no, we have water shares, but if there's not water up there, the water shares have no value. All that share's saying is if there's that amount of water in the reservoir, we're welcome to use that water. If there's only 20% of that share of water up there, we can have 20% of it.
The letter says, I don't know what our contract is with Weber Basin Water, but it's like a 60% reduction. If I'm just going off memory.
So that's on the agricultural.
Yeah, and then 40%.
Residential outside.
Okay. So, I mean, there is
Their outside recommendation as of
a
last week.
contract, and we still are reduced.
They'll still ask us to reduce by the amount that they're doing. So they will calculate that. And frankly, if they don't have water up there, they have nowhere to get water. I mean, they can only pump so much out of the ground. We can only pump so much out of the ground per month. It's kind of what it is. You know, it comes down to the point of, do you water outside or do you have water to shower with? And it might get that bad this year. So,
Counselor Arnold?
So, last year, everything kept coming back. It was like every meeting we were talking about, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And last year, I thought then, and I do now, I don't like being elected officials. I mean, I would like to step in if we have to, but on a day-to-day basis, you're the professional. And one of the things that Chief Brinkman said to Mayor Searle is that he supported him and allowed him to run his department how he felt he should. And you know more about water in the parks, you know more about traffic in the parks, the fertilizer, the weed control, all that kind of stuff. So I personally would rather turn that over to you, and I'll support you. If you say we're going to turn the splash pad on, I'll support you. But if you say we're not running it at all this year, I'll support you then. If you say we got to close the parks, I mean, it's like when Chief Shawley's running a fire. You know, I'm elected official. I'm not going to run in there and go, hey, by the way, put a hose over here by my house because it's coming close. It's something. It's like I'll stand behind him and go, I support you in what you're doing, and that's where I think we ought to be with you. This is your right up your alley, and it's foolish for me, you know, to come here every, you know, 2 Tuesdays a month and say, well, this is what you need to do with when you're watching it every single day.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that as we go forward that we're all on the same page as far as following the restriction, because I can follow that restriction. It is going to be a nightmare enforcing it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be neighbor against neighbor. We know what happened last year. We know about the phone calls, all the phone calls and that. So I just want, you guys are going to get the negative feedback. I can make the decision on what we need to do as long as I have the support. You guys are good with it. I know what kind of feedback you're going to get from it. And so we're just trying to stay in front of it. And I just want to put this out there, make sure everybody knew, and that we'll get you better information after the 1st of April. So,
Mr. Brooks.
If I could address some of those exact things, I guess this is our way to come into you saying, we've met and talked on this. I've met with Sean, I've met with Rich. There's a lot of impacts on this thing. We kind of got a pretty good idea where we want to go, but it's not good. And we just want to give you a heads up that if we implement these things, it's going to be crazy. But what we had kind of just in passing talked, and no formal decisions were ever made, obviously, but Rich is going to have a big impact. If we shut down Golden Spike, which I believe we should do, that affects a lot of these rec programs. They're just gone. It also affects the military academy. They're going to have to find another resource. If we can keep one part of the park green, I would like to use our big park and at least keep the half where we would be doing fireworks. Try to get through July 4, have our usual celebration in that regards and our fireworks, but then shut everything down then. But I don't think I'd ever open the splash pad. We've talked about that. I think when you got a year like this, that's just not something we should do. And we do try to recirculate that, but there's still a lot of loss of water, and that's such a luxury item, you know. I don't even know if you're going to have water for your bathtubs this year, let alone a splash pad. I just think we got to be really careful, and I think we need to set the example. We're going to take heed on keeping part of that park green. But I think it's just important that we at least get our Old Glory days in and get through July. But we may want to consider even canceling because he's only going to be limited. We have one softball, baseball field up there. My thoughts is just limit the whole thing because I think we're still beating on that one park. If we're going to cut some out, we're going to get a lot of complaints from all the ones from Golden Spike. Why are we going to let the other ones go up there? Fireworks is another one. I still would like to see that happen. I think that's a big deal, and it's such a popular thing in the city. If we can do the Old Glory Days and fireworks, maintain that as best we can, but at that point we shut it all down. Park reservations, I would shut those down too. I mean, it's just one of those years that we are, anytime if that's dry and there's no water on that, just people walking across that park is going to cause damage. And so in the long-term goal to keep our parks viable, I just think we've just got to take some tough decisions and choices, and you're going to get the phone calls on it. I mean, we know where we'd like to go, but we didn't want to do it until we had your blessing kind of thing. So that's where we're at.
Councilor Hilton.
Thank you. I think it's important for you to bring this to us so that we know what you're recommending. And I appreciate this whole discussion, and I have tremendous respect for both of you gentlemen, in fact, all of city staff. And I concur with all the decisions that you recommended, and I think it's important for you to know that the council and the mayor support what you're trying to do. It's going to be ugly, and we're going to take the hit for it.
You will.
Politically, so.
So just real quick, one thing that I think we need to consider a little bit. I wouldn't mind. We are going to need to adjust our water rates. I mean, just because we're already kind of in trouble in the water fund, you know, from last year. And I think financial means is a great way to motivate people. So I think that's something I'd like to see the council. We need to take a long, hard look at how our water rates are structured. I think it's a great way to motivate people to conserve. I would way rather be financially motivated to conserve than I would like to be told to conserve. And so I think that's something we can definitely look at. The other thing is, and we'll just have to consider what we're going to do, but are we going to put, how hard are we going to enforce this? Like, are we going to have our police officers issuing citations?
That's going to be a nightmare, and we know that. The only difference is between this year and last year is everybody's lawns are going to be dead this year. So if somebody's got a green lawn, we know they're watering.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it once a week on these limited amounts, your lawn's going to die. All you're doing is basically keeping roots alive. So they're all going to look bad. I don't think we'll have many green lawns unless, like I said, you go out and spray paint it. That's your only hope.
So, and as far as we're already working with Weber Basin. They have hired a professional to work on drought structuring rates. So we will be participating with them and the person that they've hired to come up with some rate structures for droughts. So I think on that, we're going to be in pretty good shape. They've already got them working on that, and they're going to present to us in April on that as well, as far as drought structuring, which should coincide well with our budget. And I've invited Cody to go to that with us as well.
Councilor Stevens.
Yeah, you're lamenting about we're going to take hits. I disagree. There'll be grousing and moaning, absolutely, but we won't take hits, the city, the elected officials, because this is not a Riverdale problem. This is a state problem, and there's going to be so much saturation of PSAs, public service, state on radio, television, on all media, telling what the problem is and educating that everybody's going to come on board. Now, I worked for 3 years in a municipality in Southern California during the late 80s, early 90s, and one day a week, I got a car, I got a list, and I was, quote unquote, a water cop. I would go and put little things on people's door. And did I interact? Was it harassment? No. It was, in fact, it was actually kind of the neighborhood kind of would check those green lawn, so to speak, issues, and they would give them an earful if they had too green a lawn, and everybody else didn't. So I mean, there's some unintended negative consequences. There's also some issues that will come up that will surprise you, and it's a process, but it's not isolated to us, and so it's going to be the process that's going to happen, and you just work through it.
Okay, thank you. In order to keep things moving, let's just see if we have a consensus to enact or give the staff an opportunity to look into some water restrictions and water rate adjustments. Is that what we're looking for? Is
anything to do
just
with
kind
the
of a vote of
restrictions,
confidence in the city staff to continue on with?
Slide the water rates in there. All of a sudden, that was pretty
Look at the
we would still have
taking
to bring that
steps to
back
help
into
us save
you.
water.
You haven't voted on
Cody
that,
over
but
there, like,
Yeah, we're not selling water. We got fixed costs for what
Right.
we got to do something.
right.
So all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. That's good. So there you go, Mr. Douglas. Carry on. All right. Finally, we will move on to our action items. Action item number 1, consideration of resolution 2022-10, awarding a bid to Post Asphalt and Construction for the 950 West Improvement Project in an amount not to exceed $319,794.75. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor, again. So this is just a street reconstruct, be milling the edges, overlaying the center, replacing any curb and gutter that meets the criteria for our replacement, and also some sidewalk over there. It should make a way nicer street as far as drivability. We're also going to replace, I think, 4 or 5 water services before we do it that haven't been replaced on that street yet, so hopefully avoid them breaking and coming through the asphalt. But we've worked with Post a lot in the past. Good contractor, we should have good results. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions? Seeing none, Councilor Arnold.
move to approve resolution 2022-10 as stated within the packet in the amount not to exceed $319,794.75.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Maragoni, will you poll the council on this resolution?
Counselor Hanson,
Aye.
Counselor Arnold,
Aye.
Counselor Hilton,
Aye.
Counselor Stevens,
Aye.
Counselor Merrill.
Aye.
Very good. That passes unanimously. Action item number 2, consideration of resolution 2022-11, awarding a bid to Skyview Excavation for the 4600 South Roadway Improvement and Extension Project in an amount not to exceed $1,060,375.80. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the road that leaves from here. Like we spoke about earlier, we will be replacing not replacing all of it, but doing some overlay on this in front of the building here, replacing curb and gutter, widen the road out to full width, and then continuing on to the end of the city property. It also has a little bit of storm drain work in it. We're gonna extend the water line to the end of the city property. Curb and gutter only, curb and gutter on both sides, sidewalk on the west side only. The other thing we will have to do with this project that will be an expense for around $30,000 is we're going through the wetlands, so we'll have to mitigate that. We'll also be spending that on top of this, what this quote is here, but we're working with the Corps right now just to do a purchase on that, straight up trade purchase, so we won't have to do any mitigation down here. Have not worked with Skyview before. We've researched them thoroughly, brought them in, sat down, had a nice interview with them yesterday. I feel comfortable with the work they've done with Ogden City lately. They did a large project there. The engineer on that project was happy with them. As far as what we can check them out, I feel like they'll do us a good job, but we have not worked with them in the past. And if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them as well.
Any questions? Counselor Arnold.
So I'm not digging this one at all, because we're creating a road for those guys to build that entire development. And it's until they get their bridge in, they're going to use our bridge, right? I mean, I don't know if it's our bridge, but the one right here by us. So everything that they do is going to travel on this road with all the equipment and everything, right? I mean,
No matter what we do, we have this bridge open and it's a public road, so no matter what we do, they will use it.
right. But if we build this road $1 million into this road, they're going to use that first. Do we have any assurances that they'll repair, replace, or is that all on us because it's a public road that we're creating?
If they did negligent damage, just like anybody, then we'd go after them that way, but they would have open use of it. You could do something in your development agreement that required them to build the bridge. That's the first portion of the deal down there, I would think, and make sure they did that.
Before we did the road project, or?
No, before if they was gonna build that, be the first item they
Right.
would do down there.
Yeah, and we could do that. We could add in language to cover us in case there was damage done to our roads and things like that. I'm not as worried about that one. I think this was part of that original agreement we had signed off on this. This was always on the plan that we would do this. So whether we do it now, I think the idea was Sean wanted to get ahead of them, so we get it in the place we want rather than they want. So
I would like to see us use this as leverage on the park. You know, when we talked about the
and
possibility.
we'll continue to do that.
Because, you know, we're going to spend $1 million and this could be a non-starter with one of the things I was going to talk about with the water restrictions is nobody can put any landscaping in, nobody can, you know, so we're even if they come in and start this thing, we can't put in a park, you know. So, I mean, I just have some reservations about us getting too far ahead of them on this one.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about that. Yeah, I mean, at some point in time, we're going to have to do it, but if we ever want our park done down there, you're going to have to do this, and now would probably be as good as any, just cost-wise, rather than put this off too long. So the way things are going up, this could cost us 3 times this, you know, in 2 or 3 years. So that was my thought. Let's jump on it. And I know, like I said earlier, Sean wants to get it in where we want it. Because if they come in with something that's designed differently, they're going to try and get us to tweak that and run it somewhere. We still want to preserve as much of our piece as we can, and that was the idea on this. We run that along that edge. We still have the full park, our full 40 acres or whatever it is. So, that was the intent on that one.
Counselor Stevens?
Would you just address, you went over it a little lightly about the wetland. Are we talking about the pond area? Is that what you're referring to?
So when you go,
And-
not
and,
the pond next to the parking lot, it's the one on the far south end of the property. And it's seasonal.
Far south end.
So if you follow the railroad tracks back, right when you reach the end of our property, it's actually the water that comes under the tracks.
Oh, okay, I know what you're
So it
talking.
kind of bubbles up, and you'll see it like this time of year, it'll actually be water and it'll be flowing, and by June, it'll be dry like it's just part of the field. But it is been designated as a wetland, so we do have to treat it as that.
So when you talk about you're talking, I assume the Army Corps of Engineers, is it gonna be, that land gonna be swapped, or is it gonna be,
So we'll purchase wetlands somewhere else to replace it. They have a site out in Fox Elder County where you can just do a square foot purchase to replace what you're taking out.
oh, okay. That's all. And, well, I guess, and how will this impact the Frisbee golf course?
So they'll probably, on the road, they'll probably lose a hole and maybe have to move a basket or two besides that first hole.
But we can swap them land somewhere, right?
They're actually trespassing down there on half that stuff anyway, so,
If there's nobody else on.
including ours. I guess we've given them permission, but I know the other box haven't, so.
And I mean, if the city council don't want to build this at this time, I mean, that's kind of the direction that we've been headed, that I was kind of told to head for. If it's the decision not to do that, we'll hold off. You know, we've been.
No, I'm-
losing
I'm-
10
I'm
to
for it.
20%,
And if Bart's for it, we'll get everybody.
We're going to go unanimous. Okay, Counselor Arnold.
Move to approve resolution 2022-11 as stated within the packet for the amount not to exceed $1,060,375.80.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Maragoni, will you please poll the council?
Counselor Hilton,
Aye.
Counselor Stevens,
Aye.
Counselor Henson,
Aye.
Counselor Merrill,
Aye.
Counselor Arnold.
Aye.
All right, fantastic. So that was unanimous as well. Very good. All right. Well, that's exciting to get that road going. We'll now move on to the comments section of our agenda. Any comments from the city council?
Yes.
Counselor Stevens.
We, as a council, in a not unanimous vote, chose to raise the franchise tax with the property tax to come at a later time. Would you put it on the agenda soon, like next time, and so we can get a timeline of when that's going to be dealt with? Because that's a process. It's, truth and taxation and those types of things. Where we're at on that, if you'd put that on a future.
So do you want a presentation?
I don't care. I'll put it as a presentation would be fine, either from Mr. Carden or Mr. Brooks.
Like timing wise, we should be able to do that with the tentative budget. And we can present like the direction we're gonna go, and then if you guys say, nope, we wanna do a property tax increase, like if we have it in there and you say, nope, we don't wanna do it, or yep, we do wanna do it, we can do that with that strategic planning with tentative budget. That still gives us time.
Sounds good. Because I know how precious it is not to bring up things that aren't on the agenda, just so that it's on the agenda in a future meeting or.
Do we need a consent item to put it on the tentative budget, or what are you saying, Mr. Carden?
I'm saying we can talk about it with the tentative if you want, and so it can be part
That's
of that
fine.
strategic planning meeting, and that would still give us time if you wanted to do something this year. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be on an agenda item between now and then, it can just be part of the tentative.
Okay, so you'd like a discussion on the
Yes.
on the strategic or the budget planning meeting, the tentative budget, to discuss a property tax increase.
And then that will give us a chance to have some dialogue on that.
Okay.
If that will.
Please.
We would still need either your consent or another council member's consent on that. We gotta have at least two of you to agree on that.
Unless he was going to talk about it anyway. Or you, Cody?
We always talk about the property tax rate and what it is, but I don't know if we're gonna add it or not at this point, so.
Is there a second person that wants to have it added to the discussion? I'll have it added. Yeah, so we can at least discuss it and see, because it is a process. We've got to go through the truth in taxation. I think Ogden City's doing a thing where they're going to go every other year or something. So if you could get some information on that.
And I'll double check with Steve, but I think timeline-wise, that should give us time that we still could move forward if you guys saw fit with that.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Any comments from the city staff?
Just quickly, since we're talking about water, you remember a few years ago we passed that water shares law that we required everybody to bring water shares with them. Jake's very familiar with this. He's had to run into this a number of times. We have had a couple people concerned because when we passed that, we designed it more for single resident homes. And it's worked well. We've actually brought in some water shares for the city that we desperately need. What we didn't really address at that time was the high-rise apartment buildings. And we've got a developer right now that's really been pushing our buttons on that. So Sean and I have met with the state, and we're getting really close to bringing that back into you. We'll have to tweak that to change that so it fits, because it doesn't really fit now. And the cost that it was going to present to them was like huge. And speaking with the state people, that's not really an accurate reflection of their use. So that'll be coming very shortly. And the timing's almost perfect where we're dealing with water issues. But I think it's a good thing you passed before, and we need to continue that. But it will be tweaked a little bit. So we'll either next meeting or the meeting after that, we should be pretty close on that one. Just to give you a heads up on it.
Anyone else? I just had a couple of quick comments. I wish Chris Stone was still here. He does if you could just pass this on to him, he does a great job with the newsletter and with everything. He just kind of does everything. And those things he gave to Mayor Searle and to Councilor Ellis, they're amazing. I had heard that there was a Mayor Mitchell in the new Batman movie. Everyone was coming up saying there's a Mayor Mitchell. And I said, well, hey, Chris, let's look at doing something in the newsletter. Maybe we can do a little logo or something funny, and he got right back to me in 10 minutes and had Riverdale crossed out. It said Gotham. He had a Batman sign behind me. He had all these things made up. And I said, well, maybe I better go see the movie first. Well,
Yeah, maybe it's bad.
come to find out, Mayor Mitchell's horrible. He dies in the first 5 minutes, and he's a bad person. Gotham City's terrible. It has nothing to do with Riverdale, and I would have wasted my whole newsletter explaining that, so we're not going to go that route. So anyway, but please pass on to him. He never says, hey, your ideas are stupid. I can come to him with anything. And he's just the greatest guy ever. And he's so talented. I mean, the videos, you guys have seen his video work. It's amazing. So pass that on to him. And then I want to recognize Sean of the Public Works. A couple of months ago, I asked if we could maybe help with the streetlights a little bit. And as I've driven around, I'm just amazed at what you've done. I know they're in short supply, but last night I was just like, fixed. I counted probably 20 lights you guys have fixed, it seemed like, anyway. And
I would love to take credit for it, but a lot of it's just timing. The light bulbs come back in stock. I mean,
yeah.
What do you do? I mean,
Yeah.
you're sitting there for 6 months waiting for light bulbs, and
Yeah.
it just kind of started coming together. But we'll probably have another presentation on lighting. Rocky Mountain Power's getting ready to try and force us out of our contracts, because they're starting to phase out the high intensity bulbs that we currently use. And so we'll be looking at going to LEDs. So we might be switching a lot of that out, which would be good. We'll gain a lot of ground, save a lot of power, and have kind of a fresh system again. But we're working with Rocky Mountain Power right now, and hopefully we'll bring you something back at budget time to look at them as well. So, but thank you. We have been working hard on them. But
And I have
just
not had as
timing.
much luck with Rocky Mountain Power. I think they fixed one of the ones I reported. So we're, about 25% is all. So that's a D or an F in my book. But anyway, with that, with nothing else, we would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Of a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We stand adjourned. Okay. Now we're scheduled to have an RDA meeting next. Does anybody need a break or anything before we go to keep rolling? Okay. Now we've got some presenters out there that are probably anxious to get going. So okay. We will go ahead and start our Riverdale City RDA board meeting for Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Please Please let the record show that all members of the board are present, as well as members of the city staff and members of the public. We'll see you, Mayor. Thank you. Have a great night. Yep. Okay. We will now have a time of open public comment. This is an opportunity to address the RDA agency regarding any concerns or ideas. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And state your name and your address after you approach the mic.
Larry Hanson, 805 West, 3875 South. For the record, former executive director of the Redevelopment Agency of Riverdale, former Riverdale city administrator, acting during a period of time when the West Bench RDA project area was adopted, and having worked on that as a significant part of my work in the city and the significance that that plays in my history as well as the history of the city, I began working on the West Bench in 1977 until 1996. Picking this West Bench project area up, very significant, and I'm sorry if I need to go over 3 minutes. I need to bring some institutional memory to this board. I respect and appreciate so much what you do and the deliberations you make and the decisions that you must make ultimately. I was approached in a couple of ways about this particular agenda, and because it is so significant to me, I want to mention a couple of things that guided us during that time. And as far as I'm aware, no one on the board was serving in 2005 in a decision-making capacity. So I will tell you, at that time we had probably the premier legal counsel in redevelopment guidance from Bill Oswald and Randy File. Bill Oswald is one of the principal crafters of redevelopment agency law in the state. We used at that time, and by the way, I pulled this off of the website tonight, and just as a matter of reference, it's outdated. There's a redevelopment agency report by Lewis Young dated November of 19. So it's a couple of years old, but it's on there. But it states a couple of pertinent things. This project area is one of many that the redevelopment agency oversees. It was created by the redevelopment agency in 2005 following a study by Bob Springmeyer, who again was one of the leaders in the industry in studying blight and redevelopment for many redevelopment agencies. At that time, you may recall, Cinedome was a subject of redevelopment, dilapidated and basically an eyesore and a hazard. And so, along with the prospects of vacant property, in addition to blighted property, this redevelopment agency board, your predecessors, adopted this as a project area, both north and south of Riverdale Road, which is wonderful because that adoption by this agency begins to govern the use of the properties by developers and entertaining proposals, different things. And of course, the big anchor that came in was Larry Miller replacing the Cinedome. The timing of the budget adoption is a different matter. This particular project area had no funding available until 2012 when, and it was with significant difficulty and challenge, we met with Weber County, the Weber County School Board, and other taxing entities to get them to buy in to the fact that this property on that west bench is premier redevelopment property with high potential use, sitting geographically between two freeways transversed by Riverdale Road. And we all know the traffic on Riverdale Road. So this is and has continued to be a prime target area for appropriate redevelopment. So after 7 years had passed from the time the redevelopment agency adopted this as a project area until 2012, we finally got enough votes from the taxing entity committee that they would participate. Nowadays, the laws have changed, and these taxing entities can opt out or they can negotiate percentages, different things like that. Back then, it was you're in or you're out. And our proposal either succeeded or it failed based on what we could represent was a potential long-term, highest and best use, potential beneficial usage of that property for the broader community, including all taxing entities. So having done the studies of what could be developed, they adopted a budget. Larry Miller was not included. And so there was no, even though they increased the value of their property significantly, I think their assessed value is probably over $10 million now. There was no increment generated because we had no approved budget for that project area. And so the baseline sits status quo until new development takes place following an extension that was passed recently, 2019, which allows for a trigger date on new assessed development as long as it happens before 2025. Well, we're talking now of a 20-year period of time, and prior to 2005, there was some time where this was not. There were many proposals that came and left, some of which I was involved in and some of which never did hit the city offices, were negotiated by the property owners up there, principally Knudsons and Gibbies. In any event, this trigger date, assuming that the Maverick and the Gibby Floral are constructed and completed this year in 2022, that property then will be reassessed for tax year 2023. As of January 1st, 2023, that a new existing value, assuming it's completed, I don't know what the forecasts are, it's probably, a couple of $1 million, something like that. That will trigger the flow of increment to the West Bench project area. Okay. So from that point on, although this website shows a period of 15 years of 100% increment collected by the agency, it is probable that that increment will grow only according to the completion of other developed, constructed, and assessed properties subsequent to January 1st, 2023. So therein lies a consideration relative to the budget that was approved at this time was $9 million cap. That's how much the tax entity committee approved that the agency could pull off of this area over 15 years. Now, I glanced at a 103-page document that you all had access to,
Some of it was marked up, redlined, and whatever, but there were a few pages in there that caught my attention, and without referencing them, and am I okay to continue?
Sure, you're okay, yeah.
I'm trying to lay some groundwork here that will help you as you discuss this proposed development and the implications.
I mean, we want to keep it moving, but yes, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to keep it right on.
Yeah.
In any event, the proposed development will begin to spin off the increment based on the assessed values as construction takes place. In previous redevelopment agency project areas, we have been very careful to try to hold developers to a firm time frame, stipulating with regard to the reimbursement of their costs from the tax increment. If you don't complete this by a certain date, you aren't collecting any increment. We experienced that over here at the crossing at Riverdale Road, and some of you may remember that, I don't know. But actually, the development didn't occur and increment wasn't distributed because of that. In this project area, as I noticed, there's a couple of things in there regarding the petitioner relative to projected costs of their improvements, city engineers stating relative to these civil improvements and infrastructure costs, they sort of corroborate, these are reasonable estimates for these costs. But from what I gathered from the proposed participation agreement, it looked like the petitioner was heading for being reimbursed some number. It seemed like it was in excess of a $9 million cap, and whether that's been adjusted and this is outdated, I don't know. But there's one other thing that concerned me and caught my attention, and that was back prior to the adoption of this budget, the Redevelopment Agency Housing Loan Fund went up on the West Bench because Rocky Mountain Power wanted to build a substation on the highest, most prime elevated parcel. And it was up where the Binghams and Don Gibby and Leo Gibby lived. Well, knowing that, at the time, Randy Daly was Community Development Director, and we sort of challenged Rocky Mountain Power and said, you can't do that. That's a prime piece, and we can't have you do that. So the housing program went up. Bingham's had already agreed to sell their property to Rocky Mountain Power, which they did. We approached Don and Leo Gibby and agreed to buy their property, which was their personal residence and a rental property. And according to the financial records, we paid roughly $19,000 to acquire their property. We negotiated a swap with Rocky Mountain Power to give them 1 acre where the current substation now sits. And in exchange for that, Rocky Mountain Power exchanged 5+ acres back to the agency. Okay, this proposal by the petitioner expects that the city will contribute that property for the benefit of this particular development. And, that struck me as like, wow, they want the $9 million and they want the 5 acres. Within a year of us acquiring that property up there, I had an offer for over $1 million for a piece of the property for a potential hotel. I'm of the opinion that the West Bench project area still has highest and best use development capabilities. It is, in some respects, a career project to end up with what's best for 9,000 residents. It doesn't appear to me to be advisable to be willing to concede all of the tax increment that's proposed to come off of this area when there are other potential development possibilities up there, including the Motel 6, the state of Utah property south of Motel 6, the 5 acres that the agency owns. There could be need for infrastructure improvements on those properties, and a need and a desire to exchange some of that increment with the developers, should there be additional developers. The other thing that I noticed in the packet on pages 102 and 103 was that the petitioner had included $1,020,000 that they would, I don't know, reimburse the city for city's costs, whatever. And as you look further into that, 700,000 roughly was to go back into Riverdale Road project area, which makes no sense to me since the RDA housing program fronted the money for purchasing the property, $519,000. It's documented and it's in the budget. So should this proceed, there needs to be some careful consideration as to the specifics and the facts and where monies flow and where they don't. The other piece of the $1,020,000 appears to be reimbursements to the city engineers for their proper inspection and certification of the construction of improvements. So the city engineers would pull off $300,000 out of that $1,020,000, and $700,000 goes to, I'm not sure who really, but it appears to me that it probably should go to the housing loan fund. So in conclusion, I would say, please be very careful what you do with this West Bench petition, because these people who petition do go to great lengths in studying, preparing, and putting forth information, not all of which works in the best interest of 9,000 residents. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to presentations and reports. This is a discussion regarding proposed West Bench RDA participation agreement with Riverdale Commercial Holdings, LLC. Mr. Brooks?
Mayor, I think at this point we'll defer to Mr. Heap and or Jake. I don't know who's going to do it. Once they get done, I know they got a PowerPoint presentation and everything, then I'll address some things afterwards from my perspective and part of our staff's perspective. Is that fair enough, Ted? Is that what you want to do? So we'll just turn it over to them and let them go. Now, I would note that Ted's got most of his people here, and we do have Adam Long, who is our RDA attorney, also present. If we have questions at the end that maybe, Adam's the Randy File of Larry's days, so he certainly knows RDAs, and we've leaned on him heavy during this, and if you need to, you're paying for it, so take advantage of it. So.
Not very much.
I disagree with that one.
Okay,
We should
Ted.
hire him.
Ted, if you could just state your name and then make sure that microphone's on, and we'll look forward to
Do
hearing
you
your
think it's
presentation.
gonna work?
I don't know. It's kind of a distance there, isn't
Pick
it?
it up and talk.
I'll talk loud. That's okay. You can all hear me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited to be here finally. We think it's a great project. We worked long and hard, and we appreciate the staff. I have to say first off that it's really not fair what you guys have done to me. Because I'm sitting back there, I'm supposed to be the hard-nosed developer guy, and I'm crying my eyes out with Mayor Searle's talk. I've got to work with him quite a bit here at the beginning, and I just love him. And Councilman Ellis, too. Great guys. You can always tell it kind of flows down from the top how a city's tone is, and really, I was glad to be here today, actually. But others that I just wanted to say, Mike Eggett's been great, and Steve, and a lot of the councilmen. We really appreciate everything you've done for us to get to this point. As you can see, we're proposing, and I know a couple of you haven't been here to see some of the things that we've done. We've been working quite a while on this. It's basically 7 buildings, roughly 283,000 square feet of product that we call distribution retail. That product represents a rather meteoric change in retail. The way people buy and sell things in America has changed dramatically, and it's mostly based on the internet. We believe that this product is well suited to the future. Quite a few cities are all doing this, or this type of thing. I was out at the International Center at the airport a couple of weeks ago. I actually had built a hotel out there a couple of decades ago, actually. And I was out there on some other business, and I noticed what Amazon is doing out there. I don't know if you've been out there, but Amazon has a building that is probably 5 football fields large with I don't know how many bays to it. And there are, I would say, at least 5 more of those types of buildings with 50 to 70 bays for 18-wheel trucks going in out there. So what's happening, if you want to be convinced as to the shift that's happening in America with retail, go out there and take a look, because that's the future. This type of product, we're not proposing to compete with Amazon here. This is smaller, and it has a retail look to it. The intention there is that this product picks up not only we're basically 10 to 20% of it has got a retail front to it. So that would pick up the local people that want to drive over and buy something, but it also picks up a regional market, and of course really a worldwide market, because the rest of it is storage for internet business, and anybody that's doing retail needs to have an internet presence. So we believe this represents what is the future of retail, and we hope that we're doing this in a way that you'll be proud of. We think it's a great product. We've worked really hard. The buildings are built on paper. We're ready to go. So as far as timing goes, we're ready to do it as long as we can get everything approved and taken care of the way we need to. What we've done, and we can take as little or as much time as you want to answer questions or do whatever, but we did prepare a little bit of a slideshow that would give you what we think are the pertinent pieces of information relative to your responsibilities to both the city and to the RDA. Our first presenter, we're going to have Jake, the civil engineer, representing our civil engineers, come up and talk about a few things. And then we've got Cody Dieter here as well, who's an expert on RDA finance and tax increment. So feel free during the presentation to ask any questions that you have. We also, I just wanted to mention too that we're working hand in glove with Maverick and also with the credit union. We've met with both several times, and we believe that we can come up with a really homogeneous, beautiful, upscale project, not only for us, but for that whole area. So with that, I'll let Jake come up and pick it up from there.
Thanks, Ted. It's a pleasure to be back in front of you again. Jake Tate, 2010 North Redwood Road, Salt Lake City, Utah. And there is some misinformation going on here on this photo. I'd like to draw your attention. The architects make this look really good, but there's not a blade of grass going on this project. I just want you to know that. It's all rock, it's all xeriscaped, but it looks really good on the photo. So if you wouldn't mind advancing. So we wanted to kind of bring to your attention what's going on. I know some of you have been involved in this from the beginning, others just kind of becoming more it's being brought to your attention. And so we've kind of highlighted the area here that the RDA, the light blue area here is basically our project. The Crossroads Center at Riverdale, Ted and Paul Heaps here, or Paul Willie here with us, own the right side of the road, and the left side that's kind of hatched out there is the 5-acre parcel that was mentioned by Mr. Hansen earlier, that is part of the acquisition that allows us to get to the 7 different buildings that we're proposing on this project. And as part of that, north of the blue area is all America First campus. They own the 70 acres north of there. The RDA does not extend into the AFC campus, but below there, Brookhaven, Motel 6, Maverick, the little piece right on the very corner is the UDOT parcel that they own. And so that's kind of gives you an idea of, and there is some RDA below Riverdale Road, but as was mentioned, that's been pretty much redeveloped out, all of it that's available. So just bringing you up to speed with where we're at. Thanks. Could you advance? And this is a screenshot of our project. It shows all of the different buildings here. We're trying to be able to provide that destination retail, the distribution retail feel, and be able to get a lot of product out there and availability for people to come in. You can see there is no green on that landscape other than the trees. We are definitely aware of the city's interest in keeping it eco-friendly and trying to reduce our water, and we're definitely want to be part of that movement. And so we feel it's a great product that goes here. It's going to, like Ted mentioned, we have met with Maverick. You can see at the bottom of that picture, we do have cross-access with them. We've negotiated that so that their trucks can exit through our property and our trucks can exit through them. America First is really excited. They asked us to make sure we have a sidewalk directly from their corporate office to Maverick so they can get their snacks and drinks at lunchtime. So we are working with both entities, and we're trying to make sure that this product and is harmonious and works together as one large, because we see the West Bench in its entirety. And there's a lot of things happening, and I promise you in the next 10 years, it's going to look totally different than what it does today. There's a lot of amazing things happening, and it's fun to be a part of those. Thanks. So we wanted to talk about why we're asking for the money. And one thing I'd like to talk a little bit about and clarify is, so you'll see, we'll get to it here in a moment, and you'll see where we get to the $9.9 million that came up for. And we'll talk a little bit about where that is, but mainly most of this is what we'd like you to see is this is going into the community. So the blue road here is being extended. We're working with Maverick to get an entirely new road, basically from Riverdale Road all the way up to Cozydale. And then we're going to extend a new road up to the power station because that also facilitates the area. With that, it's being widened. Currently, there's no curb and gutter. There's no sidewalks. There's going to be curb, gutter, and sidewalks on both sides. There's going to be bike lanes in the road. It's going to be full development. There's new storm drain that's going in. It's really going to be the availability that it allows. There's going to be 2 lanes in each direction, which right now, that's one of the big things for America First. At 5 p.m. when you're trying to get out of there and make a left-hand turn, it's hard to get out. Maverick's putting in dual left turns with their project, so that's going to widen that up, and we're going to come in and extend 2 lanes all the way down to Cozydale to the north end of our property. That will allow the trucks, not only from Maverick, to come out in heavy times when traffic's there. It might be difficult for them to turn left and get back to Riverdale. They can come through our property and access that road, 1500, and then get into the queue to turn left or to turn right back onto Riverdale Road. So transportation is a big part of what we're trying to improve in the area. I also represent America First and their master plan. We did a huge traffic study that looked 30 years into the future and really kind of looked at what's the problems here, and it's traffic. And this is step 1 to resolve those issues. So both sides of the road are being improved all the way down. And like I said, there's great things coming even further north of here that we'll talk about in the future, but we're laying the foundation for all 110 acres to be developed in the next 10 to 15 years. And so that $3.8 million, that is direct hard improvements in the ground, curb, gutter, sidewalk, landscape along the roads for the city, parking, bike lanes, some utilities. We'll get in a little bit more to the utilities. We've broken it down a little bit further, so if you wouldn't mind. But these improvements, what we wanted to do is highlight who benefits from these, because not only does Maverick benefit that by having access through our property, but allowing their trucks to get out, widening the road gets more people in and out of the area, because it's really, you got one way in, you got coming off of 4400 and you got coming off of Riverdale, and that's the only way into the West Bench. And it's really, traffic is key here. And so all the properties, whether it's Brookhaven, whether it's Motel 6, whether it's the RDA parcel, Gibby Floral, everyone has access to get more people in, more people out by the road improvements that we're putting in. Thank you. So one of the things, and do you mind if I take this? I'm a bit of a mover. I want to, everybody see this one? Is it okay if I talk over here? So the sewer extension is a big part, and maybe Sean can talk to this if you have questions about it, but there's a limiting factor currently that sewer basically is crippling expansion up here. Because right now, everything in the RDA area here exits through an 8-inch sewer main that, just so to step back, the dashed lines are existing sewers that are up here, and then the solid green lines are proposed sewers. So everything in the RDA area right now goes down this pipe and across, and we are down to about 120 gallons a minute of capacity is all we have at this point, because we haven't done any of these improvements. So as part of our project, what we're proposing is there is a stub up here, a 10-inch sewer line up in 4400. And so as part of our project, we're going to extend a 10-inch main down and across and pick up all sewer, basically from this line over, everything there is going to go up into the new stub. That's going to allow Maverick's development, that's going to allow our development, and that's going to allow Gibby to have capacity to grow. With Maverick's project, we're helping them install a sewer main that allows them to gravity flow their sewer so they don't have to have a pump system to take their sewer. For long-term maintenance, they were more than excited for that, and so we're facilitating that sewer stub for them, and that will maintain there. America,
Jake?
Yes.
Sorry, quick question, but does that allow them to have an RV station?
It does.
I know that was a concern.
They are going to keep the RV station. The RV dump will be there. So America First will continue going this way, but any future development here, all of the crossroads at Riverdale project and anything up here. And the big thing is we've heard that there is hope that maybe another hotel might accompany Motel 6, maybe a couple new hotels will come in. That's a lot of sewer capacity that you need for 200, 400 rooms. This extension allows that to facilitate that to happen in the future. And one of the things that with the sewer, the RDA parcel, the 5 acres is great, but in my, how long have I been doing this? 20 years that I've been doing this, this is one of the most difficult parcels to actually develop that I've come across. There's 35 feet of fall across the site and not a very long distance. We've got an old road in there, so we have a sewer line that goes across here, we have a water line that goes right across the middle, and then you've got huge transmission power lines that go across it. All those restrict building heights, you can't build under the Rocky Mountain power, you can't build over sewer lines, you can't build over water lines, you can't build a flat building on a 35-foot change in slope. So there's a lot of things that has to happen to that site to make it developable. So it's a great piece of property, it's very visible from I-15, but there's a lot of money that has to go in to make it developable. And so these sewer improvements, and one of those is there's a sewer line here that serves not only all these office buildings and the Motel 6, but across the road, there are people who are, does the sewer go across the road, or is it just water that is being fed here? Sean?
That one, the water feeds there.
Just the water. Okay, so all these buildings are fed by this sewer. So we're relocating it through our property so that we can change the grade, drop it down and make it flat to put a building on it. But that also allows us to get them into the larger capacity and potentially develop more in the future. So same thing Gibby's and Maverick will have there if you wouldn't mind advancing. So as you can see, these improvements, while it benefits us definitely, it allows development there in the future. It allows Maverick to do that without having to maintain their property. It gives Gibby the opportunity to do whatever they want on their parcel. And it provides capacity for Motel 6 area, UDOT area. Any of these facilities up here now have a lot more capacity. We're talking going from 120 to almost 500, 450 gallons per minute is capacity, so quadrupling what's available up there. And so that's a really exciting thing that this project's doing. All right, could you advance? Thank you. All right, so this one, this is the big ticket item. So the dotted lines again are the existing alignment of the power lines. And what we've done is we've worked with Rocky Mountain. We paid them $50,000 to do a design. That's just for the design. And they're going in and they're relocating the overhead lines to follow the road rather than cutting directly across it. That allows the 5-acre piece here to be totally unencumbered overhead. That also allows a good portion of our project to be developed without overhead constraints. And so this one's the big ticket, and the problem with this is Rocky Mountain would not give us a firm number yet. So they said, we have 90 days to do our design. What they didn't tell us was that's 90 business days. That's not 90 calendar days. So we won't have an answer from them specifically on cost until May. But when we met with them early on, we said, what are we talking? Are we talking $1 million? Are we talking $10 million? And they said, 3 million plus or minus 20%. So we took 3 million plus 20% because of how things are going right now with costs. Everything's higher than you expect. Steel for buildings was out 14 months. I think it's come down to 8 or 9 months now to get steel for buildings. So this is a big ticket item, but it's definitely something that will help facilitate development in the area, if you wouldn't mind advancing. And again, that helps Maverick. It clears some overhead lines. It comes down their property line so that it's not over their building. It gets it a little bit off of Gibby's parcel. And so it really kind of helps the overhead ability to develop here because they will not let you develop underneath their power lines. Thanks. So another big item here that we're doing is talking about Weber Basin today. They have a 21-inch transmission line that goes down and feeds your city. And America First in the past upsized from 24-inch here. And so as part of our project, because that runs right through the middle of our project, is we're relocating that water line around our property. But we're also upsizing it to 24 to help their capacity. So a 24-inch water line is going in. Now, one of the issues with that is they only make it special order. They don't have 24-inch pipe laying around, and they don't produce pipe unless they have a specific amount of pipe to order. And so they're telling us that that pipe is 6 to 8 months out just to get it on site. And so we don't want to order that pipe until we know we have a project, which the RDA helps us have a project here. And so that's a big ticket item that we're doing. Now, one of the other big ticket items here is right now the city's water system is kind of supplemented by Weber Basin water. So you have a tap that comes off that line, and there's a 6-inch and a 4-inch line that come off that. And when needed, you can open up your valve and it kind of charges your system, gives you a little more water. So what we're doing is with our new line, we're putting in a vault that's probably half the size of this room. And we're putting in a 10-inch tap and an 8-inch tap to increase your capacity up there. So you're going from a 4 and a 6-inch to an 8 and a 10-inch. And that is a massive vault. That's probably $300,000 just for that vault. And that's really the main beneficiary of that is the city and these other facilities. Because right now, as Sean mentioned, these properties over here being fed by the cities through a 6-inch line, we're running a 10-inch directly to them. So that capacity for them allows them to have better pressures, and we ran a water model, and this had a lot of pressure here they basically had 70 PSI during a fire flow at Motel 6, which is a lot better than what they have now. So this is a direct benefit to the residents across and to Motel 6. So this is something that doesn't really benefit our project, but it helps the RDA area, and it helps the other developments move forward. And then we're also extending an 8-inch line down so that Maverick can have fire flows and so that Gibby can have fire flows to their property. So again, more people are benefited in the RDA by what we're doing. Please, thanks. And again, a lot of these pressures will help America First with whatever they choose to do in the future, and they do have a lot of things coming down the pike. So thanks, you can advance. So here's a summary of what we just talked about. So when you add up the roadway, the water line, the overhead transmission, the Weber Basin line. Now, the one thing that was mentioned earlier is this $1,020,000 is a direct payment for the land. Like initial discussions with the city talked about potentially the city donating the land, but we didn't end up moving that. So the red line that's in the project, the description is probably incorrect because we did can't think of the word. What did we do? We got someone to come in and value the property. Appraisal. There we go. Lost me for a minute. We did an appraisal and it came back at that $700,000 number. So that's what current market value values that property at. And the city has carry costs that they've had to pay over the last 15 years that they've had, and that's where the $300,000 goes. So that's not just for the engineers. That's to pay the city's carry costs, interest costs, as they've carried that land over 20 years. And so that's where the $1,120,000 is going. It's a direct, basically we're buying that land from the city. So at market value. So that $9 million that's available just went down to $8 million. So the only available funds that we have is $8 million. And so these soft costs, that goes into our fees, traffic studies, designs, SWIPs, everything that's associated with a development, and to come in and do this analysis for the RDA. So all of that adds up to $9.9 million. So already for Ted and Paul to do their project, they're $1.9 million more than they can get from the RDA. Then you take the $1 million to repay the city for the land, $8 million. So they can only get $8 million of that, and this is almost $10 million of their money. This isn't tax that's set aside. This is Ted and Paul paying ahead of time for it, and then the city gets reimbursed for their property. Ted and Paul get that money back over the 15 or 17 years, depending on the extension. So I just wanted to make that clear that it isn't $9 million, it's $8 million because we're paying the city for the land. And then we've kind of gone through where all that money's going. And that number's been verified by the city engineer. He agrees that those numbers are current market values, current rates that are going. So it's a lot of money. Development's expensive right now, very much so. All right, if you wouldn't mind. So I'd like to turn the time over to Cody Dieter for just a few minutes, and he can go through a little more of the cost benefit. He understands that a lot better than I do. So we'll turn the time over to him. Thanks.
It's good to be with you. Appreciate Mr. Hansen being here. He actually hired me when I was at Lewis Young to do your annual report. So I've been involved with the city for 10 plus years. And one of the things that I've noticed since I've been working with the city and this RDA is that this is great land, but it's not been developed for a long time. Mr. Hansen mentioned 1977. That's a long time ago. That was before I was born. And so it's now we have a project that's in front of you. I was talking with Ted and Paul earlier that their motivation certainly is to see a good project and to make a reasonable return. And this is the highest and best use for this property. Otherwise, they would have proposed something different. And so we finally have a project after 45 years. My goal is to share with you some of the highlights from a financial perspective, both to benefit the city and to understand how the RDA basically functions. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Once the 7 buildings are built, the retail that will come from that project will be $125,000 of sales tax to the city. That's your point of sale based on your unique sales tax arrangement that you have. And so that's a meaningful amount. As mentioned, you now have the municipal energy tax that was approved, and so you'll see about $10,000 per year from the municipal energy tax. The RDA, as was mentioned, $1 million coming back to the RDA for the land, and you'll continue to receive the $200,000 of property tax that you currently receive. So over a 15-year period, you're talking about $6 million that comes back to the city or the RDA. So just want to make sure that's in your mind, that there is some benefits directly to the city and to your budget. So if you'd move to the next slide. So in terms of the values that you see on the property, the current land value or value of the entire RDA project area is $35 million, and they're proposing to add almost $46 million in building value and tenant improvements for a total value of $81 million on the site. The base value, meaning the value that's basically stuck in stone that everyone will continue to receive their property tax from, is $20 million. So you're seeing an incremental value of $61 million of new tax value coming into this area. Go to the next one, please. So here is the revenue that comes to the RDA based on each of the taxing entities that participate in this project. It's the far right as 9.7 million would be the total amount that would be produced. And as was mentioned earlier, there is a $9 million cap. So you would produce sufficient over the next 17 years with the 2-year extension that was already approved to cover this $9 million. And who's going to take this one? I'll just close that. Any questions on the finance side while I'm here? I can bore you to death if you need me to, so just let me know if you need to take a nap.
Sorry, I don't get to talk to you guys as much. I just kind of wave when we get to here. But really, I think the critical milestones as we close this out is if we get through 2025 and this hasn't kicked off, that RDA is gone. The money's gone. And so I think that the project that's being brought to you is a very excellent project. It's the highest and best use, and it meets into the deadline. We're kind of, the window to access that fund is getting smaller and smaller, and for someone to be able to come in with a different project and propose it is going to be a difficult task, and I think we've got a great project right in front of you. The issue that we're running into are material shortages and delays that are coming from all construction at this point. Like I said, steel was over 14 months out just to get your girders for your buildings, and concrete 6 months out. Pipe is 4 or 5, 6 months out. Rocky Mountain, when we started this, what was it, 12 to 14 months to get the big steel poles that they need to relocate the overhead lines. And so that's come down a little bit. The steel companies have been able to start to increase production and catch up a little bit, but we're still talking 6, 8, 10 months to get steel out here. And so as we get closer to that 2025 deadline, it gets a little more encouraging to move things along. And we hope that the project that we put in front of you is appealing to the city, because I think it's a great use for the area. I think it's this combined with everything that's coming down the pike over the next 15 years is going to be totally different than it has been in the past. It was a wonderful place as Ellis Orchard when they had all the trees and everything up there, and it's going to be a wonderful place as we look at the RDA area and the West Bench here in 10 years, and you'll think, man, this is totally an amazing place, totally different. And we're looking forward to being a part of that, and we're grateful for you guys listening to us tonight and fitting us in. So we'll turn the time over to you for any questions you have for site. Ted's happy to answer anything, and Cody's here.
Well, if they want questions, let's get Ted's in now if you have questions on that. So you did such a good job. No questions.
It's not like we haven't been talking about it.
That is true.
They almost did. Okay, Mr. Stevens.
Could you please explain what is meant by the triggering event for the 17-year, because this 2025, that's new to me, and why, I don't know.
Adam, you want to earn your money here, buddy?
Not much.
Now, I might add, the first time I ever met Ted, we were down in Provo, and I got there late at this meeting, but I sat next to him. When we stood up after that meeting and I was looking at his belly button, he's an intimidating guy. But you see Adam's on our side. When I'm behind him, I don't worry as much about Ted. So we have a couple really big boys here. So you do, but he's still a big boy, Ted, a lot bigger than I am. So
okay, so when we say triggering in a tax increment type situation, what we mean is the date on which the agency starts collecting the tax increment from the project area. So in this case, the agency has a deadline to start doing that, and that deadline is January 1st, 2025. So from the agency perspective, we could start collecting tax increment from the project area under the current budget, just what's already been authorized on January 1st of 23, 24, or 25. If we go beyond January 1st, 2025, our ship has sailed, and that budget is essentially not worth the paper it's printed on. What that 2025 deadline is not is a development deadline. So all that means is the agency starts collecting the tax increment from whatever taxable value exists in the project area for that given year. Hypothetically, if a project comes in 2026, the agency would still collect the tax increment from that just for a shorter period of, for 16 years instead of 17 years, or however the math works out. So that's what triggering means, and that's the significance of the 2025 deadline.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, Ms. Hanson.
So, based on what's already been developed and the increase in the values with the Larry Miller thing, Harley Davidson, and now Maverick coming on board, if we needed to, we could trigger it at some point before 2025, regardless of where we're at.
Correct. Yeah, so the agency could trigger it for January 1st of next year. And the agency would then get the increment from whatever development has happened since 2011, or more accurately, whatever the increase in taxable value since 2011. So yeah, that would bring in whatever has happened within the project area since then. And Cody, that's baked into Cody's numbers, which I have no reason to doubt. The difference between what the current project area taxable value is versus the base year value and what it potentially would be with this project.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, Ms. Hanson.
And maybe I misunderstood this when I read the packet, but it seemed like when the RDA tax board group of all these, Weber County, the school district and everything, approved the $9 million, it was specifically earmarked for the infrastructure improvements that they mentioned?
That, I'm not sure specifically earmarked is completely accurate. That is definitely a significant motivating factor in getting them to agree to this budget. Is that?
That's correct, but under the plan itself, there's a number of things that could be included in that. But the priority, at least with Riverdale at that time, was the power lines and infrastructure.
So it can
Main
go to
water
other
sewer, yes.
things.
There's land acquisition. There's a number of things that you can include in that, but it's not specifically to that. It was just that was a priority order for Riverdale.
Yeah, but certainly that's when we, I guess, pitched it. That was a big part of it.
Yeah.
Is that really the infrastructure needs to make this, to make this area, allow this area to develop.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Long? All right, we will reserve the right to call you back up. But yeah. Any questions for Jake or Mr. Arnold?
It's probably kind of unorthodox, but I have a lot of respect for Larry Hanson, and I was just curious if you would be willing and he would be willing, after seeing that presentation, to come up and give his assessment of, with his institutional knowledge and this presentation, what his thoughts were.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Can I clarify one thing?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
So
You weren't on the. You weren't
We
on the
talked
list.
about that $1,020,000, and we haven't got it right yet. So it is going where Larry Hanson talked about. It's going back to the RDA Housing Fund.
Okay.
So if you look at that piece of property on paper, according to the property tax website, tax year 2021, it was worth $1.3 million. Ted told us, no way, not worth $1.3 million. So we did an appraisal. It came back at $700,000 and change. We brought that to you guys. So that's one piece of that. So then there's a differential of about $300,000. If you remember, we bought 3 other pieces of property up there on the corner. That was about $250,000. Then to get this bad boy rolling, it cost about $60,000. So that's what that $1,020,000 is it's to make all the RDAs whole. So like, I feel like we have to pay that stuff back before we can talk any money, because we're in the hole that amount. So that's what that money is. That doesn't give us any money to do anything. It just pays off the RDA's debts and gets money where it needs to be.
Can I ask Mr. Corden a
Yes.
question?
Yes.
On the $1,020,000, right? That's what it is. Based off of what they explained, and maybe I didn't follow it, but that money's coming from the tax increment. So really, they're not buying the land. We're getting paid back from tax increment.
Exactly.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yep. And so like there's been a few items of the staff concerns that we have, and we haven't raised any of those, but that's one of our concerns is it's like, okay, they're not really buying it. We're paying ourselves back from it. because, you know, like Larry made a great deal on it years ago, and so we need to pay that RDA housing fund back. I'm glad they have a flexible pipe on this microphone. With all due respect to Mr. Heaps. Works both ways. I appreciate your question, Mr. Arnold, because we have seen projects come and go, proposals come and go. Not any developed quite to this length with the investment of the petitioner and the engagement of other professionals to the depth that they have gone. There is a lot of truth to the infrastructure benefit to the overall West Bench. And I can remember meeting with Lynn Molding and talking with him and maybe Sean as well about we have some sewer issues up there, and if we dump that's maybe the bad way to say it. If we put too much down that sewer pipe, those people up on the ridge, you know what I'm talking about there, they're not going to be happy people. And so I'm glad to hear that they've addressed that. I appreciate the information about the water particularly as well. And we all know ingress egress is important on and off of Riverdale Road. And so with proper traffic engineering and all of that work, what I see as far as the civil work, the infrastructure, appears to be reasonably good. What, you know, the appraisal, 700,000, you know, appraisers put together their work in a professional manner using comps from different areas. And with regard to engineering, slopes and different things like that, there are other uses that could be made on the property that, you know, I'm not, when we looked at West Bench, before I retired, we had a fellow come in who had a connection with Chinese banks. And I don't know if any of you remember what he put forth, but it was a cozy Dale development, including all of America First campus. So 110 acres, whatever it was, using the light rail line out of Ogden to bring people up to Cozy Dale Station, on over to Falcon Hill at Hill Air Force Base, hotels, the whole 9 yards, Class A commercial space. And so understanding over all these years what's happened in retail distribution with Amazon and delivery on demand at your doorstep, I'm not in a position to say yay or nay relative to we need to put all these structures in there to facilitate that going forward. The one thing that, given the what I would consider low ball appraisal, 700,000, considering I had $1 million offer from a hotel within a year of us buying the property, good freeway visibility, high elevation in the county with a view of the Wasatch Front, especially on that top end where Bingham's and Gibby's had their property. Given that the developer has been successful in other developments and has connections, and I would assume adequately been vetted for financing and abilities to perform. You've heard them say on that list of items and the costs that total up $9.8 million or whatever it is, that they're going to front that. And that is exactly what we have expected historically over any developer in a project area. You're going to front this and you're going to build it, and the sooner the better, because then the increment will flow, and you're building something that we want to have built, which is a first key question, And the second is the increment will be available for us to reimburse you on an agreement in a manner that will supplement your profits on your venture. Now, having said that, if they're going to front all of this civil work, which has to take place first, and they have the ability to perform on that, and in light of the 700,000, which maybe I'm wrong, call it lowball, appraisal, but whatever. I appreciate Cody saying, the agency, the 9,000 residents have an endowment here, a perpetual fund in that housing loan program that will serve to benefit 9,000 people, principally those who are unable to afford improvements, many widows and others who were low income that we helped significantly through the loan program. And it's even been expanded to purchase program. So to say that, we're going to put that money back in housing, the RDA housing program, that should be a given that'll take place. However, we have a developer here that should have the financial ability to make that happen straight away out of the gate, particularly if you agree to settle for $1,020,000. Make our housing program whole out of this West Bench. At least you can argue that with the 9,000 people, you may or may not like what we're putting in there. You may love it. But we participated as an agency, and according to your decision making, we've been made whole on this thing. So to summarize and give you my opinion on this presentation, it's a wonderful presentation as far as quality of the presentation. When I was involved with proposals, we've vetted them out as far as their ability to perform, their track record. What could we see that they had done, and do they have the ability to perform? And if they do, and they will, then it's a matter of choice as to what do you want to see there. There is obviously some benefit to be derived by the city with the civil work on the West Bench, but don't think of that as an exclusive deal to this petitioner. No matter who comes in there to develop that property for whatever purpose, even if it's the credit union that expands their campus and activities, something's going to happen there, particularly with sewer and some of the water and things like that. So while I would not necessarily endorse this proposal, I can see that it has potential value. But as opposed to accepting it out of the chute and looking at a 103-page document that was in your packet, I'd say there's considerable vetting to take place there, and redlining and perhaps negotiating relative to, okay, if we proceed, then step A, B, and C, let's do this, and this first, and let's make sure that the 9,000 residents can call you up on the phone and get a reasonably good answer from you that this made sense to me and here's why. And you can make that case. I'm sure you can. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks, do you want to share some of your thoughts?
I do, but before I do that, I'd like to have Cody come up and express a couple things, since he's been involved in the financial side from the city, just to fill you in a little bit on those parts.
Well, Cody's doing that. Can I say something?
Yeah, Mr. Arnold.
Just one thing that I'd like to point out too is the purchase of the property. I mean, one of the things we've got to recognize is, it's a development of property that they purchased. So as far as moving forward, all of the other entities that have proposed things over the years and stuff, nobody's purchased the property, nobody moved Brent out, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, they're in the mud, right?
You're more motivated than you are. We'll get this built if you let us. All right, just one more second here.
So didn't we pass an ordinance about if we go past 8:30, it was pizza or something?
I don't remember that, but
Oh.
if you're telling me we did, then
Check the records on this. Put it on the agenda for next time.
Should be.
I can start on my stuff if you want.
Yeah,
Cody,
if,
you ready?
if it won't throw it off too much.
He's ready.
You ready? Let me just say at the outset, I'll get started, and then when Cody's ready to go, and I'm going to refer to Ted's project because that you become famous around here, Ted. That's how we call it. We don't call it by the name. We know that it's your team. So when I talk about Ted, we're referring to his team and his project as a whole. I spoke with Ted last week or 2 weeks ago, and I indicated our intent tonight is not to throw him or his project under the bus. We don't have any issues with Ted or this development. We just have some concerns and just philosophical differences on how this money should be split up and where it should go. And so that's kind of the difference that we just come and Adam's beat this thing to death for us in that the stuff you got's the red line development agreement and the clean copy, and then I emailed you the original project plan area and also the project area narrative, and so you had a lot of stuff there to look at, as did I. Cody, you about ready to go?
I'm ready.
So before I go any further, I just kind of wanted to let you know that none of this is directed at Ted or this development at all. It's just the differences. We're trying to highlight how we look at this a little bit differently than they do, and then ultimately this is going to fall onto your shoulders to make a decision because you are the decision makers. It's not us. So we may see this thing one way, and you might disagree with us. We don't know. But there are other concerns that we have besides just this, and so that's why, this what I did tell Ted is that I have to tell them everything I know because that's my job and my staff's job to fill you in with everything that we have on the table, so that you make a very informed decision. And so that's what we're doing. So if this comes across as us going after Ted, that's not it at all. And I just want him to know that. And I even called him today because we do have that. Second meeting set on here, which is a closed session that involves the sale or purchase of land, and I wanted to be open with Ted and let him know that we will talk about that and we will stick just with that. We won't refer to a lot of these other things that we brought up in this meeting, but those things do have some impact on this because they're considerations that we have to look at. And so I felt it was important that we did that, and we don't want to affect the property prices. And so that's why we're allowed to go into closed session to discuss those items, and there will be other things that we'll talk about there, but it'll be strictly that. But I didn't want Ted thinking I was trying to sabotage anything in that meeting either. We won't do that. We'll be careful. And I'm going to have Adam stay here too to keep us in line on that as well. So Cody, I'll turn it back over to you.
Just 1 second. And one thing I want the board to know before we move into this next session or section. So Ted has called me a couple of times, and he really wanted to get his project in front of you. He knows that the city and he are in two different places. And so what we want to be thinking about a little bit is there a way we can find some middle ground? Is there steps that you can take to hold Ted, or can we get the city together with Ted, and can we find, because the city's going to present their side now, or the RDA is going to present, hey, these are our concerns. So is there things that we can do, places where we can meet with Ted in the middle? Is there things he'd be willing to concede? Is there things we'd be willing to maybe concede a little bit? So be thinking of that as we go through this section.
Okay, and so apologize we didn't get this to you in the packet. This is something Steve and I put together today. And just to reiterate what Steve said, he asked me to look at this not from the business standpoint, not from what's on what Ted's proposing, but just from the finances and just from the numbers. And as Mayor Mitchell alluded to, or RDA Director Mitchell alluded to earlier, keep in mind that when we're making decisions for the city, a lot of times you're making them for the city. Tonight, as the RDA board, you're not only making them for the city, you're making them for the mosquito abatement district, the sewer district, the Weber County, and the school district. And so you have a lot of hats on right now to make sure you make the best decisions with these RDA funds, and that's always the case, right? So just a couple things. As Mr. Tate alluded to, they have a lot of numbers in there, and they build in contingencies, which if I'm sitting in Mr. Tate's shoes, I'm building in contingencies. They're a nightmare from the city. From the standpoint, and we've talked to Mr. Heap and Mr. Tate about these things, but what triggers a contingency? When do we pay out a contingency? When do we not? And so that is very problematic. So the thing that we talked to them about is, hey, can we set this up like we did 550 West and Riverdale Road, and we have like a punch list. And so every time you complete, you put in an 8-inch sewer line or whatever it is, then we will pay up to a maximum of X number of dollars. But if it exceeds that amount, you're kind of on your own. They didn't do that. And so you look at like this 3.8 million, it's got $472,000 worth of contingency built into it. So they may incur those costs, they may not, depending on how they do the project. But from an accounting standpoint, we've got to represent to all the taxing entities what we did with that money. So say they come in cheap, and depending on what the contingencies trigger, which we don't have firmly defined, we would pay, that extra amount. That's something that I don't feel comfortable with on any project, having that contingency that's not formally defined. The other thing, and Sean can talk more about this or whoever, the earthwork, from my understanding, that doesn't benefit any of the other entities. It's on their site. So is that something that if we're looking at just paying for infrastructure, should the RDA be reimbursing that? Not that it's not needed, not that any of those things. So that 3.8 million number all of a sudden becomes 1.2 if we pull those things out. And then you can see as we go down the list, and like I said, this is my accounting ideals. If you want to approve it, great. I don't, whatever. That's just what I see. And then if we scroll down, and I can email this to anybody, everybody, it doesn't matter. The soft costs, and we talked a lot about this in meetings with Mr. Heap and his team. Those give me a little bit of heartburn too, because what is a soft cost? Like, define a soft cost, and how do we go back to those taxing entities and say, hey, we paid for $200,000 a soft cost. We don't know exactly what they are. Now, do they exist? For sure. They're funding this money up front. They're paying Mr. Tate a lot of money. They're paying Mr. Dieter a lot of money. They're paying their attorney a lot of money. So there's a lot of soft costs, no question. Just should the RDA be reimbursing for those and including those? That's not what we've historically done, but that's up to you guys. So if you'll go scroll down just a little bit. So all of a sudden, that takes our budget of 9.8, and I've shown that the 1,020,000 goes back to the city. So that reduces that amount if we pull all those contingencies and stuff down to like 5.2 million. That's some of my concerns with this project, is those contingencies are super hard to deal with. I would rather we just agree that we're going to pay them up front, or we're not going to pay them, because when do they trigger, when do they not? And like the Rocky Mountain Power one, as Mr. Tate talked about, it's just going to be a pass-through to Rocky Mountain Power. So I would feel more comfortable from an accounting standpoint if we had that invoice and we just reimburse them for whatever it is. However, due to timing deadlines and stuff, we don't have that at this point. But you can see on that one, they added a 20% contingency, and it very well might be that. It might be more, but there's an extra $20,000 built into that number too. So, and that's just some of my concerns.
If we could have Cody address that one item, or not Cody, but Sean, on the earthwork and stuff, because this has been a source of contention for us for a while, and I think a lot of that falls on Sean's shoulders because he deals with stuff a lot more. So
I'd echo exactly what Cody said. My concerns have been the contingencies and also the earthwork. I mean, it probably does fall under your prevail as far as the broad scope of the RDA. But from going back to what me and Larry had talked about back in the beginning, it was more infrastructure type costs, not land use costs that was associated with one developer. But you'll have to make that decision. Is that fair to say, Jake, that doesn't affect anybody but their property?
That is fair. I think it should be noted, though, that those improvements are on the RDA parcel. Like, That's to level that 35-foot change. And so it's kind of a burden that we're taking from the city for the parcel that we're getting from you. And so we can use it on our site. We would need dirt on our site, but that's, I think it was 16,000 yards of dirt is coming out of that hillside to make it somewhat flat. So it is very true what you said. It is only for our site. That does not benefit anybody but us. But as we mentioned earlier, those funds in the RDA don't necessarily need to be directly to just infrastructure. It is to help a difficult site be developed. And the problem is it was mentioned earlier, there could be another use that could utilize the slopes. Yeah, there can be. But for 45 years, no one has. And you've got a project in front of you that addresses it. And it's just a direct cost to develop that site. So yeah, I do agree. So on that number, is the Rocky Mountains not in there, the 5.2, or is it up?
It is, if you scroll up, no, I just pulled the contingency.
Okay. Yeah, and when Rocky Mountain, they're like plus or minus, and I was like, it's plus. Right. It's not minus. I haven't had many things go minus lately with construction costs. But I will share one experience with you with RDA in Riverdale and contingency. So we also represent the developer who did the RDA down below 550 West. Now, during construction, we had an approved set of plans, and there was a change that came at the direction of the city to change the thickness of the asphalt in a certain portion of the area. That ended up as a $75,000 change order that the developer had to eat. He did not get reimbursed for it. That came right out of his pocket. And so that's why we build contingencies in. Now, I'm fine, and I should speak with Ted before I say this, but I mean, if we don't use a contingency, I'm fine taking it out. We're not looking for free money. We're looking for money to pay for what we're doing. And I can tell you this, contractors are holding bids for 30 days. We're getting emails all the time that, just so you know, this asphalt cost is going to increase 15% in 30 days if you don't sign now. And so that's across the board. And so going into a project this big, $40+ million that they're putting into this, to just not to have that comfort gives me heartburn, because I'm the one that gets those calls, and then I'm the one that has to say, Ted, by the way, now you just have an extra $400,000 because your asphalt price went up because we didn't get it installed by this date. And so those are our concerns, and like was mentioned, that's why I put contingencies in, because this is their money. This isn't my money, but that's what they're there for, because it's just the weirdest time in construction. Everybody's familiar with what's going on in the world today, and it's just prices change daily, and it scares me to have a client and not give him some protection, and that's why we have contingencies in there. So,
not accounting for interest or any other soft costs or real costs, soft or not.
Yeah.
We're also not accounting for any interest of us holding this money. We're fronting the money and we're not accounting for any interest going forward for that.
One thing before Cody gets in, I want to thank you for clarifying. I'd never heard about the housing agency for the RDA, so thank you for clarifying that. I've always heard the money was going back to the RDA. My assumption was that it was for the land directly, so thanks for clarifying.
The one thing back on what Jake just said, the city didn't change the asphalt on 550 West. We didn't make a change there. It wasn't driven by us. They ran into water and had to change the depth of their sub base to accommodate the water. It was not something that we went to them and said, no, we're going to make you do more work here. It was a cost they ran into based on the site itself.
And
Unforeseen cost.
I just want to apologize. It was explained to me that the asphalt thickness had to get thicker, and it had to go to a city thickness rather than a private thickness.
No, they ran into water. They had to do deeper excavation and more sub base to get up to grade.
Okay.
So it wasn't something we went to them and says, we want more asphalt out of you. It was just a cost they ran into on the project.
Okay, well, I apologize. That's how it was
It's an
explained to
unforeseen
me.
cost,
It
and you're
is.
going to run into them on this project as well.
Yeah.
for sure. And that's where, and I'm an accountant, you can account for things 10 different ways, right? And so that's what we were trying to avoid is okay, so what really triggers in a contingency? Like if they have, and we wanted to stay away from we're getting invoices because what if Ted has a construction company that can do part of the work? Are we really getting an independent invoice at that point? That's why we tried to function or set it up the same way as like 550 West and Riverdale Road, that it was more of a punch list, like you do this, you get that, you do this, you get that. And at some point, like if we're paying all the interest and stuff, then Ted's not doing any of this work. The RDA is paying for everything, right? And at some point, that's a true thing. He's just managing the project for us. And so at some point, it's like, how much burden of risk do you want to pass on to him? And from an accounting standpoint, if he's just saying, hey, it cost XYZ, how are we to refute that without going in and doing like a full audit of his books and saying, okay, what did this really cost? And that's where the contingency amounts get to be a nightmare for the city, is because did he really spend it? Did he not? Would rather just not get into that argument because it gets pretty sticky.
And can I just clarify
Ms. Hanson?
that it hasn't been 45 years that this land hasn't been developed. We had really important founding families who owned this property and lived on the property that were important to Riverdale and still are. And so it wasn't just sitting there that nobody wanted it. They wanted it. They lived there. They established Riverdale choosing that property to live on. It is prime Riverdale property. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
That Ted owns.
Not all. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Ted and us own.
That's just where the contingencies get to be really messy. And then, from a budgeting standpoint, like I think the 550 West one, that was with Krispy Kreme, right? So we had budgeted, even the RDA had only budgeted so much. And so then all of a sudden, what do we do too? Because then we've budgeted, or you as a board have budgeted for that project, and now we're over. So if you remember, we had to do budget amendments and those kind of things too. And so we as a city staff like the idea of staying away from all that and kind of making them bear some of the burden too, just like we made Mr. Hanson on that 550 West and Riverdale Road project. And he had some problems too with water and different things, and ended up wanting to come back. I think at one point we're like, nope, we agreed to these line items and they are what they are. And so from an accounting standpoint, it's just way easier if we have a number, whatever it is, and that is what it is.
Mr. Arnold?
So the question I have would be to Sean, with the infrastructure they're putting in and a price tag of $9 million or $8 million with they get the $9 million, but we get the $1 million back or whatever. Are you happy being a city representative to say, yeah, Cody, write that check? We're good with what they're doing? I mean, or are you saying, no, we're not?
Well, it's like I said, I think Jake's done a great job on the sewer, finding us a solution for the sewer. That's a good solution, what he's came up with. It's going to work. The water line relocation for Weber Basin, that's because their building's going there. So the line has to move for their building. Otherwise, it doesn't have to move if the building doesn't go there. The upgrades to our water system is going to be huge for our area and for the city as a whole, because we can take on more water at that location as we grow. So that's a big thing. It also is going to feed more water to Freeway Park and that area, Motel 6 area, because we've upsized all them lines. Them are all great things. I'm in the same boat as Cody. I don't like the contingencies, and I'm not in favor of the earthwork that just benefits that site and doesn't benefit the RDA as a whole. And if you take them numbers out, I'm great with the rest of the infrastructure. The road's going to be good. We've worked hard to get a road with curb gutter sidewalk. We should be able to accommodate bike lanes if everything goes well, and it should tie into the future project. Well, I think all that stuff's good. It's just a matter of where do you want to spend the money at.
And just to clarify, the RDA property is the majority of the earthwork, the power lines, right? And moving the water line too. That's all RDA property.
No, the majority of the power line's on Ted's property.
But the overhead, one
More
of the things
the
I was thinking
overhead.
about is the appraisal on our property. you look at a piece of property, you got power lines going over top of it, it's gonna lower the value than, because you can't build under them. So, I mean, a lot of the money is going to improve the RDA property as well. And is there, you said 60,000 cubic yards? 16,000? I mean, can you put it on the other side of the river?
He's going to use it on his site to build it up.
Well, not if we don't let him have it.
Correct?
Can I be heard?
Yeah.
I've been waiting very patiently here. The more people come up here to speak, my list keeps getting shorter and shorter. Everybody's covering a lot of these things. So, but I do have one thing that I think is really important, and this has probably been the biggest thorn in my side from the get-go on this. I got involved in this after it was sort of on the way already. And so when some of this stuff was thrown at me at first, including our piece of property, I just couldn't agree to that. And that's kind of where we started going down this path. And so I will take responsibility for that because, and it's a little bit weird hearing, did Larry leave?
Yeah.
Oh. Hearing some of this stuff, as the emails that I sent you, the original project plan, the area plan, this is what we're supposed to live on. As I looked through those and I saw some of the minutes and different things in some of the meetings, maybe that was in the other one too that I sent, I saw that I was in some of those meetings. This is not long after I started here. And quite frankly, this was new reading to me. I must have been sleeping or something. I don't know what was going on. I wasn't the RDA attorney, so I may have been sleeping. We left that up to them. But as Larry spoke tonight, it struck a chord with me, and I must have been paying attention to at least some of his sentiments and feelings because that's where I've been from the get-go. And there's just a couple things I want to point out that I think we're missing here, and one of these is an important point. On page 25 of that original area plan, it talks about maximizing private involvement in these developments. And this is where it gets really important because the way it explains it, and I'll try to just simplify this, is the RDA money should be used as seed money. It's not a project money. So we use the seed money to make the area better, and then the developers run with that. And that's where we've got to be a little bit careful because as I look at this overall development, I do that every time, I don't just look at Ted's property. I've still got other properties up there that need developing. And if I have no money, I have nothing to offer them. So it's all going to go into one part of this, which is not, I don't even know percentage-wise, probably 50% of that area on that side of Riverdale Road. All of our funds go into that one project. And I still have projects over there, some of which I will talk about in that closed session, that are going to be expensive, and I will have nothing to offer them. So we may get part of this developed, but I will have nothing to add to it. So unless a developer comes in and foots all of it, it won't get done, the rest of it. And so that's where I think it's important because it continually, and I want you to refer to this. I mean, we're not making a decision tonight, so you have time to go back and read this, but look at page 25 on that when it talks about this maximizing private investment in this thing. And it continually refers to owners and developers over and over and over again. Those are plural, and I think the funds were intended for the whole project, not just one area. And this is where I've had this basic difference where I've disagreed with Ted on this whole thing, because it almost feels like, you know, we saw a certain sum of money and it's like, I'm going to come in and get this, rather than looking at that sum of money as seed money to develop the whole thing and spread that out over the whole project. One of the things that they talked about in there, and again, remember this was 2005 and some of this stuff changed, but I think it makes it even more important. One of the things it says in there that an acceptable ratio when you use seed money versus developers money is 6.7 to 1. So if you look at that, we're not even close on this if we sink 100% into one project. So the plan anticipated that we spread this out over there. And that's where I get a little bit nervous because I don't know what else I'm going to do. I can't cover those other areas if I have no money to work with or to even look at. They estimated at that point, and this was based on us getting $13 million because that was what they went in and asked for at first, that the overall project would end up being about $87 million. And I apologize, my numbers are wrong, but you can go in there and read it. That was reduced to $9 million. So even the 6.7 is not realistic. That's going to be way low when our money was reduced by $4 million. And so that's where I guess I've always been concerned about this, is sinking all of that money into one project, because we will do nothing else anywhere else up there. And that's what's a little bit scary. And some of that is our property. And so, and it's also slow, probably more than the other piece. And what do we do? Are we just going to sit on that one forever? Because I won't have any money unless we take it from our general fund or some other way. I don't even know if we can do that, but it's going to cost us money to develop the other areas up there, and they're not there. And it basically says, without the incentive to these owners and developers, it's going to be difficult to attract private investment to those other areas. And that's a fact. I mean, we're seeing that just this week. We're having movement on some of those other areas up there. And so they're coming in saying, what do you got for us? How can you help us? And things like this. And I'm kind of in a holding pattern because I don't know if I have anything. So looking at it from that perspective, we look at their numbers and say, when I go down this list that Jake's prepared, and I'll touch upon a couple of those just for specifics. And again, I'm not throwing Jake under the bus either here, because I know some of these were inadvertent mistakes. But so he's got 6 items there. Obviously, 2, 3, and 4, no issues. You're talking water, sewer, and the transmission lines. And the reason why, and I think this is probably why I remember it, when Larry got up there and said these things, that's what was in my head from the get-go, is those power lines were item number 1. We had to get those moved, because without moving that, Ted's main piece and our 5 acres is pretty much not worthless, but it's difficult to develop that. They pointed this out. And so that was item number 1. We have to move those. And one of the things I guess it's been frustrating to us is because they keep saying we're dragging our feet here. We have asked over and over and over again, and again, it's not their fault, because they've been good to work with. I don't have issues with them, but we've been asking, you got to give us a hard number on those transmission lines, because we got to know what that is so we can factor that into our formulas. And Rocky Mountain just hasn't given us anything. So that number there is an estimate. It could even be higher. And if it's higher, now I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. Do I have even enough to cover water and sewer costs, let alone any other piece of property? You see where we're at in this dilemma, and it makes me really, really nervous that I have any money. But going back to Jake's letter there, the roadway infrastructure has always been a concern. So when I'm looking at this saying, I need more money, I got to have some of this money out of this that I can use in some of those other developments, or they may never happen. So we've scrutinized this big time, and that earthwork has always been a thorn in our side because we just don't agree with it. And I recognize they're pulling that off of our land and taking it over and using it on theirs, but if I have another person coming in and saying, I want your piece of property as seen, without questions, then I'm kind of going, well, maybe it's worth at least that without me having to go to all this other work and giving up all that I'm doing, because all I'm basically doing is paying myself back, or paying the RDA back, or the housing authority, as we've heard tonight. So that's not necessarily a win for us. We have to get there. We owe that money. So we don't end up with anything out of that. We pay ourselves back, but Ted gets 5 acres of land that he can do stuff with. And, and I recognize there's costs and stuff associated with that, but we look at this and go, well, maybe we shouldn't include that in the package, or maybe we should look at something else, because I'm still trying to save money. And if that's a way, there's $2 million there that we're looking at, maybe we could save some money there. So it suddenly becomes a high priority to us is, do we want to look at that? And yeah, the plan, and if you look at this plan, there's a number of things that we can do with this. It doesn't specifically say road work or excavation and that kind of stuff, but it does say that you can improve ground, or I don't know what the terminology is, but landscaping, all those kind of things are things we can do. So I think we could argue that it fits, but should we? Because our priorities, again, were utilities and power lines. That's number 1 priority to us. And if we're looking at that as just seed money, do we want to sink $2 million into earthwork that we don't really benefit from ourselves? We get nothing out of that. We pay ourselves back. Ted walks away with 5 acres. So that's where I said we're a little bit concerned. 2, 3, and 4 we're fine with. on number 5, the city repayment of RDA funds, the only issue, and again, this is the attorney side of me, Jake, coming out, so don't worry about that, but he lists on there the benefiting party as being the city of Riverdale. Yeah, we pay ourselves back, but he gets the land, and they didn't list that on there, and that's kind of a big deal to me. That's 5 acres of ground that's worth $1 million. So they obviously benefited from that, and we should have RBP listed on that one. On number 6, on the soft costs, Cody's kind of covered those. Same thing with Sean. Again, it's just one of those catch-all phrases that makes us nervous. And if I'm looking for money to help out in other parts of this RDA, that's one of the things we're going to look at and we're going to attack. So, yeah, we've scrutinized this. There's no question about it. But that's where I think we have to do our job to inform you that there's more stuff out there besides just this one project. Now, ultimately, it falls back on your shoulders. If you want to give them all of it, that's fine. I mean, we don't care, but we want you to be aware of there's other players in this game besides just this one project is kind of what it boils down to. So we have been a little bit hard on him, and we pushed him. I mean, there's no question. And poor Adam's been caught in the middle of this because we're saying, no, don't do this, and don't do that. And he's been great to work with and help us out. But that's kind of where that philosophical difference is. Do we give everything to one project, or do we spread it out better or in another manner? I'm telling you tonight, I need more funds. And we will never be able to go back that taxing entity and get that increase. I just don't think they would give it to us. So it is what it is. We got $9 million to live with. How are you going to divide it up? Do you give it to everybody, or do we split it in different ways? So
Any questions?
That's where the difference is.
Sure, come on up. Yeah, you should be able to defend yourself for a minute, I think.
Ted just walks away with 5 acres, huh? We're funding the RDA. We're spending $50 million on this project. We're raising the tax increment so that the cash can come into the RDA in the first place. The problem here's the bottom line. When we first started looking at this project, we didn't consider it to be a home run. We considered it to be a good project. Since I first started, and this has been 2 years now, the cost to build a building like this was, what was it, 60, 70 bucks a foot? Right now, the last bid, we got $125 a foot. So I guess what I'm telling you is if we don't get the money that we're talking about under this RDA, we don't have a project. The implication that we're trying to walk away with gobs of money at the city's expense is just not true. What we're trying to do is get enough resources, including that piece of property that is necessary. And trust me, we're spending a disproportionate amount of that money to develop that piece of property, a largely disproportionate. Anyway. What I'm telling you is that if we don't get that, we don't have a project. We're just sitting here talking about that. I don't think we can make it work. So if we want to talk further about that, that's fine. But we are excited about the project the way it sits. But if it gets any worse, it's and we're worried about the contingency too. And it ain't going down. I guarantee you. I stake my reputation on that. Those contingencies will get used and then some. And we're taking the risk for that. We're taking the risk. If the city wants to take the risk for the increased costs and everything, we'll pay the line items. We have no problem with that. But that's kind of how I would wrap it up. So if you want money for the rest of the RDA parcels, you probably want to have our project to help. And we tried to show by those maps that I don't know what else you're going to build. If you're talking about using RDA funds to buy other pieces of property, I guess I don't know how to talk to that, but I think that what we've shown here is that we're building everything. If you're going to build something on the hotel site, the Motel 6, who I have contacted and talked to many times, that ain't happening. Maybe it will, but I really don't think it's happening. But assuming that it does, we are putting in all of the infrastructure to make that happen right now with these funds. So I don't know what else it is we're trying to pay for. That's all I'll say. But look, I'm also concerned because I want to make sure, I've asked multiple times, if there are concerns like that, we're willing to sit down and talk about them. We always have been. I'm not sure that some of these things are a surprise to me tonight, but nonetheless, we're reasonable guys. We're willing to help. We're willing to do whatever we can to make it happen. But it's starting to get tight on this thing, and if we can't get it the way we're talking about it, then we have to really reconsider. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Any questions for Ted?
Let me just follow up to that. I didn't mean to attack Ted if he took it that way. I'm just trying to explain why we've been digging our heels in on some of this, because we're trying to look at the overall project and not just his project. That's what it boils down to. And so I'm not saying they're getting greedy and all that kind of stuff. We're just looking at their numbers going, can we pull some of this back so I have other money in other places? That's the bottom line. So,
I was just thinking it'd benefit us to go into the executive session so we can get some solid information we're going to be talking about.
and that's fine, but all I can talk about in there is property, the sale and purchase of property. We can't get back into some of these things because that's not fair to them, nor can I do it by law. So, and I'm fine. I can address that because I think you need to know that. I think it comes into play in some of this stuff. So, on some of those other properties.
Even on our piece of property.
So moved.
And we're not here. This was for discussion. So we had to lay things out, and that's what I told Ted. We're going to throw all our cards on the table, and that's what we've done. I don't necessarily agree. I think we brought up these earthworks and some of these other things before, maybe not to this degree, but they've obviously been concerns to us because we've drug our feet because of that, and we've looked for ways to cut some corners. I mean, we don't dispute the basic utility stuff, and we had those numbers checked by our engineer. He was fine with them. Said maybe they're a little high, but in today's market, I don't even know that I'd go that far, to be honest with you. I think they're fair, so I'm not disputing that at all.
So I have a quick question while we've got everybody in the room. And it's kind of for Mr. Carden. So we talk about the contingency and stuff. I mean, so what you're kind of getting at is if they just put a line item and said, instead of taking the 10% or let's say 15% of the Beaver Basin, if they move that over to the 900,000 and just said this is the cost for it, you'd be kind of okay with that?
I think so. How we talked about it, and I know I brought up these contingency concerns at meetings that Ted's been at, so hopefully it doesn't catch him as a surprise. I just don't like the veritability and the left up open to interpretation of it. So if you want to say, let's write him a check for $8 million, do it. And because the other thing we talked about is Sean wanted a punch list of things to be completed. And I think we have that with Mr. Tate's design. So, like as long as that punch list gets done and you say, yep, let's do it. We want to do this. We want to do it 100%. We're sending all tax increments to this project and this stuff gets done, then I'm okay. I just don't like the open to interpretation of those contingencies and how do we verify that and those kind of things. But if the board wants to do it, great. At that point, I think it's just worth pulling the contingencies and saying, okay, we're going to pay this much for this much for this, or we're just going to write him a check for $8 million as the increment comes in, but he's got to do these things.
We really like the way that you did the last project over there on that 550 West area. You gave them a certain amount of money. We had certain items that had to be completed, and then we paid that out. Rather than having to go back and say, well, is this contingency? Did they go over? Where did they go over? And sort all that out. It's just really easy if we have a set number that this is what we will pay. If it costs you less than that, you might have made a little bit. If you go over 20,000, that's on you. And we're not trying to determine what's a contingency and what's not. That's hard for us.
And I just want to make sure that Ted's group has as much information from the board. Like, he's called me and he wanted to get this in front of him. I want to make sure the board has everything they need, and I want to make sure Ted's group have everything they need to feel comfortable with, hey, if we're going to do this, this is what we need. This is what's expected.
So I think from Sean and I's standpoint, if we just removed like column B, C, and like if we just had column H and we had those line items and that's what we were going to pay, and then we adjusted the soft cost to be whatever the difference was, we would be okay with that if that's what you guys want to do. the contingency amounts just scare us. And like we said, if I'm in this group over here, I totally get why they're doing it. It's just hard for the RDA to weigh in like, yeah, they really spent it, or no, they didn't. So it's easier if they're just gone.
Mr. Arnold.
Well, it's just a comment. It's not a question for you or anything, but just to put it in my realm, if I get an RV pad and I get it quoted and they come in and give me it and I'm shocked, I want my RV pad. I want the price. I want it nice. I don't want it to crack in however many years, whatever. I don't see why we're nitpicking, because part of the problem is using the words contingency and soft costs. That's what our hang up is. When somebody's walking in with $40 million and we're saying, well, we'll pay 8 of it to get everything back over 17 years, let's go. We should have been gone. Like the cost to put this thing in is not going down. Fuel costs, inflation, the world is not going to be easy. And I don't know the other projects. That's why I'd like to know, what the other projects are that we're looking at. And the other players in the game, the Chinese bank, the fictitious Chinese bank that was going to bring in whatever that was, I don't remember that, and I've been doing this for
It was a real thing.
12 years. Well, I don't remember that. I've been here for 12 years.
I was involved in America First.
Were you?
I
So
saw
what did they
pictures.
do? I don't see a Chinese restaurant up there. There's nothing up there. And there's Brent's trees. So the thing is, the trigger point is 2025. We got to get some stuff in there, so it's not these real, like, I'm good friends with Brad Brown. Brad Brown has tried to put, I don't know if you were involved with Brad Brown in this thing, but Brad Brown has tried to put something together in that spot since he was in high school. He's been trying. And the thing is, we got something here. It's tangible. It's like, let's rock and roll and figure out what these other parcels are. That's what I was saying about the executive session is, if I would have put my RV pad in 3 years ago, I'd have an RV pad and I wouldn't have to pay as much as I am now. So, I think we need to.
So that's another important thing, is deciding whether you want to give all the money to Ted's group. That's okay.
Sorry,
Mr. Arnold.
I don't want to hug this, but $9 million was established in 2005. It was short from what they were doing then. I remember, Larry talking about it all the time about burying the power lines. He didn't talk about infrastructure. He didn't talk about the water lines. He didn't talk about the sewer lines. He was talking about burying the power lines, and he didn't know if he could do it then. I remember that. So, $9 million in 2005 glasses. We're looking at it now. That's a long time ago.
And all we've tried to do is make it so that it's easy to either account for, or that Sean gets his list. And we told him up front, like, hey, if we can give you a list and you want to ask for all the money, that's great. But what we're trying to get at is all or nothing. So either there's not contingencies and soft costs and we just pay a dollar amount and have line items, or we have a fixed cost like we did over here. But we just couldn't ever make up the difference. Because we agree too.
The one thing on the costs on the power lines, back then we was talking about burying. Now we're talking about staying overhead. So them costs are totally different.
I'm just going higher.
Above ground's a different game.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments, then I guess we'll move and discuss whether to go into an open or a closed session or not. Is there anyone that wants to make a motion to go into a closed session?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Will you poll the board? Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Okay. That carries. It's unanimous. It looks like we're going into closed executive session. Thank you for being here.
No, not for this one. Yeah, we're not making a
I
decision.
don't know.
so-
They'll be
Yeah.
coming back.
And Mayor, I'd like to have Adam stay and Cody stay as well.
Adam and Cody stay.